Yeah. Ah, yeah. Good morning, student friends. Welcome all of you to one more virtual class that the BOS ICAI has been organizing for your benefit, for your enhancement of knowledge. With the postponement of exam by more than a month, now it is very important that you attend these classes and ensure that your knowledge is further enhanced. You have noted that in the past we have had luminaries like Girish Ahuja, T.N. Manoharan, Amarjit Chopra speaking to us in special sessions, in special motivational sessions, and I'm sure you have found them useful. We have had also the best of speakers, sharing their knowledge with us on various topics. And also we have had the council members, delivering keynote address on various topics before the commencement of a particular session. Today, I have the great pleasure in stating that we have with us T.A. Sushil Goel, who has been the chairman last year of the Indirect Tax Committee and who is presently the vice chairman of Board of Studies, one of the drivers behind this program. And he has taken a lot of pains to see that these virtual classes are made a success. Sushil is not only passionate about Board of Studies, but he is also an expert on GST. So I would now request Sushil to kindly share his thoughts with us on GST. Sushil, please.
Thank you, Chairman sir. Thank you. You are doing wonderful work by allowing students to attend these classes. These virtual revision classes organized by Board of Studies. I am thankful to you because you named me that I am the person looking after, but you are the person who is the chairman. Chairman is always very close to student, I can say. So these virtual classes are there. Now exams are postponed by another 1.5 months. Let's see what we can do for the student. Definitely, chairman is thinking about this, and I think another set of revision classes, mock test, are in the plan. Very soon we will come with the announcement as and when it will be finalized. So today's topic, we have Sasank Gupta, C.A. Sasank Gupta, a well-known faculty on GST. All we know that 40 marks for new syllabus students. 40 marks is covered under GST. And I thought I will not have much discussion on the GST because Sasank is taking the topic. So if I will do it, maybe repetition. But still I thought have 1 or 2 slides in my presentation. What GST means. Friends, exactly we all know that GST means goods and services tax. But what I want to convey all my friends here, that we must have an understanding of the law, because each word in the text makes the difference. If you have if your word is used differently, and meaning will change and the tax implication will change. We can take the example of the block credit. I just taken one example. This is section 17.5. In block credit, we all know there was a dispute. In respect of motor vehicle credit will not be allowed. So there was a doubt whether it in respect of repair and maintenance or servicing of the motor vehicles will be allowed or not allowed. So many disputes was there, so many discussions were there, every persons were having different understanding. Then in the year 2018, government has amended the law and specifically debarred the services in relation to repair and maintenance. And friends, why I am saying the services? Because whenever a car goes for services, there are some service provided by the uh, service with these authorized service centers or car repair persons. So whatever services they are providing, we are utilizing those services. Now question arises as the modified section 17.5 restricts services provided in respect of repair and maintenance. So all we know, works contract is considered as service. So no doubt on this, works contract will always be considered as services. So any service which including material, if covered under section 2199, that is 119, that is section 2 subsection 119, then it will be a works contract, and works contract is considered as service in the case of GST. But now question arises, if some goods are purchased, like the tires has been purchased by the vendor, by the person who is taking credit of this, how it can be restricted? So disputes will be there. We have to understand the law in totality. Each word makes the difference. So please have a understanding of the law is more important. And why GST? Because all chartered accountant must understand GST properly. Because without taxation, the meaning of chartered accountant will become little less. Indirect tax is more important. Although we have 60% marks in the direct taxes and 40% marks for the indirect taxes, but believe me, indirect tax is more important in your life, and it will help you in your day-to-day life, because no person in the country who is not facing GST, who is not paying GST is there. Because if you are consuming any goods, any services, GST is almost attached to that. So we are impacted by this. And whenever some questions comes in the question paper, you must think why this question has been framed, which part of the chapter they want to cover here. If you are not understanding this, then you will give some different answers. Friends, I am a council member who is serving third year in the exam committee, and I have occasion when I discussed with the head of examiner and the assistant head of examiner how to pass CA exam. So what is the mantra given by them? They given me mantra that you have to read the questions very carefully, because questions are framed with certain ideas, and students usually see that if question is on so and so topic, let me write the answer. You have to understand what exactly the examiner want to ask you. If you understand this, then problem will be half solved. Each question is definitely covering some provision of law. You have to understand what exactly the examiner want to know here. Then only you will able to answer it properly. Imagine the situation. Whenever you find some practical situations or theoretical situation even, try to imagine those situations that you are into that. If you are somebody, if the question is there that somebody is trading goods or services, trading some rice, then imagine yourself as you are in the grocery shop and buying some rice. So this will definitely help you. And no storytelling in the direct taxation paper. Believe me, you have to stick to the specific provision of the law, because if you write more, then it will not help the examiner. It will not help you to get more marks. You have to be specific, pertinent to the question, and your provision of law should be covered there. So this, I thought I will discuss about this. And when the exam will be, so many questions coming to your mind. Please don't bother about this. I am just saying all of you that exam will be done at appropriate time. Nothing to worry about it. ICAI is more alert than you, because this is their foremost responsibility to conduct the exam. Definitely you are worried about your exam, but ICAI is worried about the more than lakhs of students. But ICAI is also worried about the safety of each student. So keep in mind, we must do it. And how paper will be? So many questions are coming now. So since COVID is there, whether this COVID-19 question will come or whether any question will be modified according to this. Exam paper will be as usual. Friends, note it down. Exam papers, in fact, let me tell you, all this should not be said. In fact, exam papers are prepared already. So no COVID impact will be there. No questions will be covered from the COVID there. Because the question paper is almost prepared 3 months before the exams. So I think nothing to worry. Prepared as usually, whatever is in the syllabus, and we all know that any amendment done prior to 6 months of the exam will only come into the question paper. If it is within 6 months, it will not come into the question paper. So take care of this. Are we ready for exam? That is more important. ICAI is ready. Nothing to worry about this. Overview of exam, let me tell. ICAI is not having exam at one city or two cities. It is around 205 cities where we conduct the exam, and 5 cities abroad. So in total, we have 525 exam centers. So if single decision ICAI is taking, they have to take care of 525 exam centers. So nothing to worry. We are alert, and exams are held single question paper at the same time. All we know, the student has option to write in English and Hindi if paper is allowed. I think in GST paper, Hindi writing is not allowed, and it is very restricted. Hindi is also. And friends, I want to discuss something about the exams also, because I am very close to exam, and students have so many questions in their mind related to exams. Number of things are not known to them. Friends, all answer books are coded and processed in codes to be conceal the identity of the candidate. So there will be no scope of undue bias. Or never any question paper answer script has moved without this coding. So, and this coding is so robust that it is get uncoded only on the day of result. On the day in the morning, only it gets decoded and we prepare the result. So, in the entire process, all books moves in the coded form only. And friends, all you are aware that examiners has option to seek verification of marks post result. And friends, the exam committee is taken due care that the students are requested that why this verification taking so much time. This time the agenda taken by the exam committee is that we will do the verification. We are going into it, that verification result will be given to you within 7 days. Don't worry, if you are doing it early, nothing will be escaped from our hands. We will do entire process, but since it is computerized, since everything is in evaluation mode, we will able to deliver it within 7 days. This is the ICAI is trying now. They are also provided copies of answer books post result upon application, that we know. Re-evaluation not permitted in CA regulations, although if anything left unmarked, even part are being done. So if some questions, step marking we understand. If step marking is left out, that will be done. That is as per ICAI regulations. And digital evaluation for all paper. Let me tell you, digital evaluation have so many benefits, because step marking is also taken care by this digital evaluation. If somebody is not, if some of the examiner not given marks for step 1, he cannot proceed further for step 2. So this is the care we are taking care. And now this all examiner also going under the exams. We are taking exam for all the examiners, and so you can understand how much serious ICAI is for your exams. And as I told, stepwise marking is there. Now introduction of MCQ is really helping the students. I believe all the students will now have some ease after this MCQs, and in 1 or 2 days Mr. Pramod Bhug was saying let 100% result be there. Friends, never raise a question on ICAI's motive. We never downgraded the result in past 70 years. In the history of ICAI, never single marks has been deducted from the any answer script or any students. Always it is upward moderation, and believe me, if you are performing well, marks will be given to you. Now little bit about the results. Friends, 2 basic facts about the ICAI results I want to discuss. And believe me, you will surprised to note whether these are the facts. Yes, these are the facts. Because we have a strong belief that ICAI controlling results, and I failed because ICAI wanted me to fail. No, never it happened. Friends, no one ever failed in for 1 or 2 marks in aggregate. You will see, we used to say that institute ने मुझे 2 नंबर के लिए fail कर दिया. But believe me, if somebody, no, you will not find a mark sheet if it is a 4 paper group, even sort by 3, in aggregate by 3 marks, you will not able to find this type of mark sheet. Any student who got 197, 198, 199, passed in each subject, this type of mark sheet never available in the country. Yes, few students given me mark sheet of this type, but all found false. All found some artwork has been done by the students. Believe me, few students doing this, but the ICAI record is not changing. Few students just to show their parent that I failed by 1 marks. Even it has happened in the past that student not appeared for the exam, but he is showing mark sheet to his friends. So this is one thing I want to say. Nobody fails in aggregate up to 1 or 2 marks. If 4 group paper, 3 marks even. Nobody can fail. So if you can show me a mark sheet, it will be it will not available. I can say you cannot show me such mark sheet. Second thing, if you have a proper aggregate in your result and you passed all the papers and failed in 1 paper only. When we were a student, we also used to say that I just failed 2 marks in 1 paper, otherwise I was passed. Friends, believe me, even 4 marks. Let me take a practical example. If your total is 200 and you passed in all 3 papers and 1 paper only you failed, so if even you failed by 5 marks, this mark sheet is not available in the country, my friend. You cannot show me a mark sheet where aggregate is 200 plus and you have passed 3 papers and in the 4th paper only you sort by 1, 2, 3 or 5 marks. Even 5 marks you cannot be sort by that. So you cannot fail even by less than 5 marks. So this type of mark sheets are not available. All myth, all misconception given by the entire fraternity which developed in our mind. So you will not find it. And friends, thank you, all of you. And let me tell you, being the Vice Chairman of Board of Studies, that we are having the best study material in the world, I can say. If you refer study material properly, we are the best. And somehow it is a misconception that ICAI study materials are full of mistakes. I am Vice Chairman of Board of Studies. With due permission of the Chairman, here want to promise all of you that if any mistake pointed out by you in the study material, it will be rectified within 7 days. I am promising you, we are moving to this. So our study material by this June end, I believe, or it may take some little time, will be error-free. Presently, I believe these are error-free because no mails are coming. So I am requesting all my students, if you find single mistake in the study material, you can post it to me, giving the page number, and promise on behalf of entire Board of Studies that any mistake in the study material will be rectified within 7 days. So new study material will be uploaded, but it will take some time because we are starting this exercise and we will do it. So friends, have faith on ICAI. Our study material are best. You have to undergo this and do lot of practice because exam are there, exam are postponed, but believe me, practice will definitely help you. If you are prepared, we are also prepared. And definitely this exam portal will again open for the change of centers that we will do around 1 month or 25 days before the exams. And that time you will have an option to change the exam centers. No other changes will be permitted. Only change will be permitted to the student is change of the exam center. And for that, ICAI is fully alert and in due time you will have this option. Thank you very much to the students. Now over to the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushil ji, for your address. Now, may I request Shashank Gupta to commence his presentation. Prashantji, please.
Chairman sir and Vice Chairman sir, and very informative sharing, and I must tell all these students that this transparency and this level of information is something that when I was a student I would have certainly looked forward to. So I think the present students must be thankful to uh, the Vice Chairman that such transparency and such build insights have been. Uh, Commencing our discussion on the topic today. The responsibility that I'm shouldering is discussing GST provisions, indirect tax part of paper 4 taxation. Since we are in divisionary classes, so because we have to conduct the entire session within a limited time frame, and I am understanding that all of you would have gone through the course once, we are majorly going to attribute our time towards understanding the concepts and towards understanding some points which may merit your revised attention. So the way I've structured the entire discussion is, first we will discuss going from chapter 2, that is supply, then we will discuss charge of tax, then we will discuss time of supply under GST. So, first, when we discuss supply, let us first understand what is the rationale behind introducing supply under GST. Since when we talk about GST, it is a tax. And any tax, for it to become applicable, it has to have a backing or the force of law. And for any law to come into force, there has to be a striking event. Let us leave aside GST for the time being. You might have heard about a very famous section in the Indian Penal Code, Section 420. And what does Section 420 under Indian Penal Code provide? It says that any person who commits a fraud with another person shall be liable to imprisonment up to these many years and up to fine to this much amount. So what is the event capture? Commitment of fraud. Similarly, under IPC there is a section that if you commit murder, then there is a punishment which may result into hanging up to death. So what is the event there? The event there is commitment of murder. Now coming back to our fiscal laws, under GST, the event which will entail the liability to pay the applicable GST, that event is supply. Under income tax, it would be accrual of income, and under GST, it is occurrence of supply. Now, prior to GST, as you would have all studied in your formal course, there were n number of levies within the domain of indirect taxes. There was central excise, there was service tax, there was VAT, there was entry tax, there was octroi, there was entertainment tax. And thankfully, with the advent of GST, one thing that has happened is that all of these taxes, n number of taxes, have been done away, and a single levy has been, a single tax has been. Now, this single tax, when I say, so if you think fundamentally, You are a business owner. You had 17 shops. One shop was by the name of Central Excise, one shop was by the name of VAT, one shop was by the name of Service Tax, one shop was by the name of Entry Tax, and every shop used to earn some revenue. And now you think that today is the time of branding, today is the time of consolidation. Let me keep these 17 shops, but let me give them a unique name. Every shop a single name, that is Messrs. Shashank Gupta and Son. Now you continue to have 17 shops, but you've changed the name under a common brand name, Messrs. Shashank Gupta and Son. So will the revenue keep coming through all 17 shops, or will it get restricted only to one shop? Of course, it will keep coming from all the 17 shops. So why I am discussing this is because when government introduced GST, they had to bring in such a comprehensive section, such a comprehensive event, which would actually go on to cover all the aspects of levy as existed prior to introduction of. And what are those aspects? So let us now look into the section of supply in detail. Just a moment.
Okay, so now is the voice clear? I'm not using the headphone anymore. I just wanted to check this. Is now the voice clear? Can anyone tell me, please? Kanika, Revati, Pradeep. Is now the voice clear? Am I audible to all of you? Can anyone confirm, please? Okay, great. So I just came to check back this. That's great that you checked it right away. So we'll continue without the headphones since I have a confirmation from Shireen Bano Mansoori that the voice is now clear. There is some issue about my video. So I believe the video will not matter because majorly we will be looking at the presentation that we have here. So till now, I'll just give a quick recap. You've not missed out anything major. I was just giving a background that what is the relevance of supply under GST. So supply, my dear friends, is that one comprehensive event which has been captured as the event, the occurrence of which will entail the liability of GST. So, and supply, the government has created a big section, a big coverage under supply so that the taxes, the revenue streams of taxes which were there prior to introduction of GST, that is Central Excise, Service Tax, VAT, Entry Tax, Octroi, the revenue streams which were present under those are effectively continued even under GST. So let us look at the section of supply. It says supply includes all forms of supply. Come again. The section says supply includes all forms of supply. Now, what does this mean? Supply includes all forms of supply. So basically, one thing that we get here is that the idea of the government is to keep supply very wide. So it says supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both. So prior to introduction of GST, Goods were taxed separately under central excise, VAT, central sales tax. Services were taxed separately under service tax. But GST is a common tax applicable on supply of goods or services or both. Made or agreed to be made. What does this mean, that made or agreed to be made? I am a chartered accountant. I enter into a contract with an entity X Limited. The entity gives me an advance of 1 lakh rupees for the provision of service, for the supply of service. Now, am I liable to pay GST on receipt of such advance against services or not? Yes, I am. How come? The supply has not yet happened? Because the law says, the supply section says, made or agreed to be made. Not necessary that the supply should have already been made. If you are agreeing to make the supply at some point in time in the future, even then the liability, the supply test is satisfied, and hence the liability to pay the applicable GST shall arise. For a consideration. So usually, if you're providing any services, without consideration, then usually, I'm saying, please mark my words, usually it will not tantamount to supply. However, there are certain exceptions in which, even if there is no consideration, they will be treated as supply. Those we will discuss in some time. By a person, so it has to be by a person, and the supply has to be in the course or furtherance of business. Meaning thereby that if someone is supplying it personally, then such a transaction will not constitute as supply. Now friends, I see there are a lot of queries which have been put up by you. I'll quickly take a pause and see what is it that is bothering you so much. Okay, maximum have been about the voice issue. I believe voice issue is now settled. Amendments, yes, my dear friends, my idea is to cover, so a number of amendments will be captured in this presentation itself. My endeavor, my idea is to cover the entire set of amendments if the time permits, which means that we will have to somewhere restrict our discussion on the regular course. I also intend to cover the RTP subject to availability of time. So, which means that we will have to contract our time on the regular session, on the regular course, so that there is some bandwidth available for discussing the amendments as well as the RTP. Now quickly let me see, is there anything else which is bothering you? Okay, earlier was okay. Please can you just a minute stop, because when you put a new query I cannot scroll above. Okay, so someone has an issue with exam portal, please write to Board of Studies. Just a minute please, don't type in any queries. Let me scroll up to GA. Okay. Okay, great. So video, please don't worry about the video. Is the PPT clearly visible to you? Are you all able to see the PPT clearly? Can someone give me a yes? Is the PPT clearly visible to all of you? Because the PPT matters. If I am visible to you or not, that shouldn't matter. The PPT should matter because the PPT has the content. Anyone, can you give me a heads up on whether the PPT was visible? Monisha, Aryan, Devansh, Geeta, Mansha, Priyanka, Nikita. Can anyone give me a heads up whether the PPT was clearly visible? Monisha is saying PPT was not visible. But I've kept the PPT on full screen itself. Okay, Tabassum is saying it's visible. I believe there should be no issue with the PPT. Yeah, okay. So we have a clear go ahead that PPT is visible. And if PPT is visible, I am clearly audible to you. I think that's enough about it. That's what's really important. So we have discussed the basic essence or the basic tenets of supply. So the basic tenets, I'll quickly revise it for you. It includes supply of goods as well as services or both, made or agreed to be made. Hence, it could be a present transaction, it could be a future transaction. For a consideration, there has to be a consideration by a person. So, of course, there has to be a person doing it who will be liable to pay the tax. And normally, the transaction has to be in the course or furtherance of business. Now, friends, we've discussed that usually there should be consideration for any transaction to qualify as supply. But I told you that there are certain exceptions wherein even if there is no consideration, still the transaction will be treated as supply. And where are those transactions provided? What are those transactions? Those transactions are covered under Schedule 1. Next is, and what is Schedule 1 we will discuss. Next is certain supplies, even if they are not in the course or furtherance of business. Even if they are not in the course or furtherance of business, will be treated as supply. What are those transactions? Those transactions are import of service. Next is transactions specifically excluded despite all the above parameters. So basically, there is a negative list of GST. That is, those transactions which are for goods or services, have a consideration, are in the course of furtherance of business, made by a person, but still are neither treated as supply of goods nor services, and therefore they are not liable to GST. These transactions are covered under Schedule 3 of GST. And the last is that certain transactions have been specifically classified as supply of goods, and certain transactions have been specifically classified as supplies of services, and these transactions are covered under Schedule 2 of GST. So some of you may want to ask a question. So GST is a common tax on goods and services. Why is there a need to identify what is supply of goods and what is supply of services? My dear friends, you would have studied something known as time of supply. In your final, you will study something as place of supply. Plus, you would have also heard about the classification. So, all of these are separate for goods and separate for services. Plus, we have multiple tax rates under GST, right from 0.1% up to 28%. So as to determine what is the applicable rate of tax for a particular supply, we first need to understand whether that is supply for goods or supply for services. So this is So this is the basic tenets or basic essentials for a transaction, and these are the exceptions. Exceptions meaning those who either do not qualify all the test or do qualify all the tests but are given a differential treatment. Now, my dear friends, there are certain transactions which are specifically covered under supply. What are those transactions? Those transactions are sale. And when I say sale, sale is very simple to understand. In this COVID-19, you're going to, essentials are allowed, you go to, or leave aside COVID-19, you go to your grocery shop, you go to your stationery shop, you buy a pen, you buy a pencil, he shows you options, you choose a pen, you give the money to him. That's a simple sale transaction. Transfer. Your friend has a iPad available with him. You have a certain use of that iPad. He gives it to you temporarily to use. But that friend is very business minded and he says, I will give you the iPad, but I will charge you 100 rupees per day. So if he does it as a business, then that transaction becomes transfer, and usually the transfer is also covered under GST. So in business sense, usually you would have seen this Zoom car, wherein they give the car to you against some rental. There is no driver in the car, you have to self-drive the car. Okay. So that is basically where the car is not sold to you. It has been transferred to you for taking it out where you please. So those transactions are known as transfers. Next is barter. Barter is very common. You are champions of barter. You have a pen, but you don't have a use for it. Your friend has brought a fancy item. You like that fancy item and the friend likes your pen. You says, here is my pen, you take it and give me that fancy item. Barter. I am a chartered accountant. I provide CS services. My client supplies electronic items. He gives me electronic items. I give him services. Barter. So basically, barter is wherein you are giving items in exchange. Exchange. Exchange would be, you have an iPad. Your friend has a mobile. He says, you are not regularly dealing in it. You are not regularly dealing in it. And you want that latest iPhone X. And your friend, he does not like iPhone. He likes Samsung. He gets a Samsung phone. But he wants an iPad. So you give your iPad to him. You take iPhone X from him. So that would be an exchange transaction. Rental. So you live in a multi-storied house, your parents rent out first floor, second floor, and that is being used for commercial purposes. That is a rental transaction. License. So generally, license is something which is common when intellectual property, royalty is being paid. So intellectual property transfer, like you are all must have watched some movies recently. Movies are produced by Karan Johar or Yash Chopra, but those movies are now visible on Hotstar, Netflix, Amazon Prime, such wonderful platforms, but you have to painfully watch these classes. But that is the sad part. So basically, the movies are produced by Yash Chopra, Karan Johar. They gave a license to Hotstar that you pay me this much money, you can showcase my movie on your portal. That is known as license. Lease. So basically, when you give some property on long-term basis, that is, you have ancestral land available with you, an industrialist comes to you and says, I want to set up my factory on this, give me this land on lease for 30 years, you enter into a lease agreement, those transactions are known as lease. And last, my dear friend, is disposal. So basically, I am a chartered accountant. I have a laptop with me, and students are complaining that my video is not clear, and immediately I decide that I will dispose the laptop, and I will get a new laptop. So that, my dear friend, if I've registered that laptop in my firm's name, that is, I have availed input tax credit, so that transaction will still be covered under GST. That will still be covered under supply. So this was a brief about the transactions which are specifically covered under the domain of supply. So we have discussed basic essentials for a transaction to get covered under supply. We have discussed what specific types of transactions are covered under supply. We have discussed what are the exceptions to the normal course of supply, where they are covered. Now, the first exception, my dear friend, is that for a transaction to be covered under supply, it has to be in the course or furtherance of business. And that is why, famously, when you become a chartered accountant and when you apply for Big Four, they will generally, they have service lines. So they have a risk function, Big Fours, they have a statutory audit function, they have taxation function, they have advisory function, and in taxation, they have further distinction like business tax, personal tax, international tax. So these GST is famously referred to as transaction tax, that is basically applicable on a transaction, plus it is essentially a business tax. So today when you are a student, are you liable to pay any GST? As in, are you required to obtain registration under GST? No, because you're a student. You're not doing any business. I am not saying when you are buying product and paying GST. I am not talking about that, because there you are a consumer. But primarily, are you filing GST returns? Have you obtained any GST registration? No. But let me tell you, in your articleship period, if you get very high stipend, suppose someone is paying 1 lakh rupees per month as stipend, and if you are a good, bright candidate, you can command that if you are really working hard. Now, your annual income is 12 lakh rupees. You will get covered under income tax. You will have to pay income tax. Does not matter you're doing business or not. But under GST, even if you are getting 1 lakh rupees per month stipend, no liability to get registration under GST, no, because it is essentially applicable on businesses. So, generally, supply covers those transactions which are in the course or furtherance of business, but there is one exception, that is import of service. Only one exception, import of service. So, if there is an import of service for a consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of business, this will be considered as supply. Clear? Let me just see if everyone is with me. Okay, so a lot of people are asking what is the difference between barter and exchange. Friends, barter and exchange, let me tell you, are judicially evolved concepts. And I think your so much concern on what is the difference between barter and exchange is really not that important. But still, if you say, I'll tell you, barter is something. So, barter is a historical concept where primarily we were farmers. Mostly people in India were farmers. We were an agricultural based economy. So, someone used to grow wheat, someone used to grow rice, and because nobody can eat wheat all the year, he would give certain portion of his wheat produce and take rice in barter. So the barter was what you have as a commodity, what the other person has, and you give it to each other. Whereas exchange could be anything. Anything in the sense, it could be I have a laptop, my friend has a mobile, I give the laptop to him, I take the mobile from him. Exchange could also be about money. So when you become chartered accountants, when COVID is gone, when you get married, you will obviously, the first thing is to go on abroad on fancy destinations, right? And for that you will need forex, foreign currency. Now that foreign currency, you will give INR, you will get US dollars, euros. What is that transaction? Is that barter? No. What is that? That is exchange. You're giving INR, you're getting US dollars. So that is the difference between barter and exchange. Clear, everyone? Some of you are asking, can you tell us what type of questions will come in the exams? My dear friends, please don't ask smartly what will come in exams, because I have personally, these details are available with nobody. It is better to stick to the course. Many champions have come in the past, guessing what will come in the exam, and all these champions have come down like house of cards. So never try to play smart, especially with the institute's examination. And that is why, if you want to get a brief taste, better you address some past question papers. Even better, allow me time to timely complete so that we can take up revision test paper, because from that you will get a clear idea how to approach a question paper and how to answer that. Clear, everyone? Okay, so let us move on to the next slide. Now, my dear friends, we are going to discuss what is the exception to supply, as in those transactions wherein there is no consideration, but still these transactions will be treated as supply. So the exceptions for those transactions that are without consideration are covered under Schedule 1. And Schedule 1 says that supply will include permanent transfer or disposal of business assets where input tax credit has been availed on such assets. So basically, if I buy a car in my business's name and I dispose of that car I'm not selling that car, I'm simply scrapping that car, then this provision will not be applicable. Why? Because no ITC can be availed on car by me as a chartered accountant, because it is restricted in section 17 subsection 5. But if I dispose of this mobile which is registered in my business name, I've availed that ITC on the purchase of this mobile, then if I'm disposing of this mobile, certainly I'll be liable to pay the applicable GST. Why? Because Schedule 1 says permanent transfer disposal of business assets where input tax credit has been availed on such assets. Next is supply of goods or services, or both, between related persons or between distinct persons when made in the course or furtherance of business. Example, stock transfer, branch transfer. So what is related person? You can all refer the definition. What is distinct person? I am a chartered accountant. I have an office in Delhi. I have an office in Bangalore. I have an office in Calcutta. I have an office in Mumbai. I have a common PAN number for all the 4 locations, but I have different GST registrations. Now, my Mumbai office and my Delhi office will become distinct person. My Chennai office and my Delhi office will become distinct person. So basically, having common PAN but different GST registration number are known as distinct person, and any supply between such distinct persons will be treated as supply even if it is without consideration. Here another aspect which has been covered is that gifts up to INR 50,000 in value in a financial year by an employer to an employee shall not be treated as supply of goods or services or both. So basically why they've written it here? Because they're treating employer and employee as related persons, and when an employer is giving gifts to an employee, so up to 50,000 rupees in a financial year, the law has given an exception. Okay, you can give gifts up to 50,000 rupees, but if you give gifts beyond 50,000 rupees, then we will not give you this exception, and meaning thereby that up to 50,000, if he is giving gift means free of cost, he can avail ITC on that. But if he is giving more than 50,000, then he will have to pay the applicable tax on that, on those gifts. Next is supply of goods by a principal to his agent and vice versa. So basically this principal and agent is where the agent is undertaking supply of goods on behalf of the principal. A classic example would be of a clearing and forwarding agent. So what this clearing and forwarding agent does is, like suppose Samsung, LG, Sony, usually what they do is they have a manufacturing location, say suppose in Haryana. And from that manufacturing location, they are supplying goods across India. When they are supplying these goods across India, they need to create a dealer network, right? That the goods will move from the factory to such dealer's premise, agent's premise, and that agent will then further supply these goods. So basically, this clearing and forwarding agent, the role of this clearing and forwarding agent is to simply ensure safe transportation from the premises of factory to the premises of the dealer, plus collection of the amount payable against such supply. So basically, Samsung Haryana will clear the goods to the premises of C&F agent, and the C&F agent will further clear it to dealer X, and Samsung Haryana, the bill will directly be raised by Samsung Haryana in the name of the dealer. So it will never be raised in the name of the agent. So for these transactions, the law has said that when the transaction is occurring between such principal and such agent, the transaction will be covered under supply even if it is without consideration. Next is import of service. Import of service by a person from a related person or from any of his other establishments outside India in the course or furtherance of business. So, import of service has again come into picture. import of service, earlier we had discussed as an exception to being in the course of furtherance of business, that was that अगर आप import of service कर रहे हैं, for a consideration कर रहे हैं, and even if it is not in the course of furtherance of business, even then it will be treated as covered under supply. Now what they are saying is import of service by a person from a related person or from any of his other establishments outside India in the course or furtherance of business. So what they are saying here is that the import has to be either from a related person or from any of other establishments outside India, but in the course or furtherance of business. So if these are satisfied, even if there is no consideration, import of service will be treated as supply. So put together, import of service for a consideration in the course or furtherance of business, supply. Import of service with consideration not in the course or furtherance of business, supply. Import of service from a related person or from any other establishment in India without consideration, but in the course or furtherance of business, again supply. So these are three separate types of transactions with respect to import of service which stand covered under the gamut of supply. We'll do a wonderful question on this in our revision test paper. Okay. So friends, we have covered schedule 1. We have covered exception 2 in the course of furtherance of business. Now we'll quickly glance through the transactions which have been clarified to be either supply, that what will be treated as supply of goods and what will be treated as supply of services. So transfer of goods with title, and this is covered under schedule 2. What is the reasoning behind clarifying that what will be treated as supply of goods and what will be treated as supply of services has already been discussed. So first I will discuss relating to transfer of goods. Transfer of goods with title will be treated as supply of goods. Transfer of title in goods with property in goods being passed at a future date after receipt of consideration. Example, a returnable sale. So basically, that goods have been transferred, and if the other person is not satisfied with the quality, he can return the goods. So that is known as a returnable sale. Yeah, I believe there was a small technical hitch. I believe it would be. I believe we are back live now. So, uh, Buddy, Shailesh, Gaurav, is the video visible to you now? Sanju, I will not be taking the direct tax session. There is another faculty for it. They will be taking up the direct tax session. Uh, can you hear? Can you hear me now? Are you able to hear me now? I believe there was a small technical. Now it's okay. Now it's fine. I'm again giving another 1 minute. Is it fine now? Are you able to see me now? Everything is okay? Okay. So don't get bothered so soon. These are small technical glitches which are common with technology. Okay. So it's since we are fine back now. And there are some pending queries. Don't worry. We'll get some time once we complete this session, because otherwise it's breaking the flow. So relating to land and building, lease, tenancy, easement, license to occupy land. Now what is lease, what is tenancy, it will be clear. Easement is basically, I have a tract of land which is not directly approachable from the road. So basically this is common in farmland. So I have a tract of land but which is behind another tract of land, and I request the person who has the land of tract between my land and the road to give me a path from his land to access my land, and I pay some amount against that. That is known as easement. And license to occupy land, so that is again itself self-explanatory. Lease or letting out of the building, again it will be a supply of service transaction, self-explanatory. Supply of goods, that is goods forming part of assets of a business are disposed of. This we have already discussed. Goods held or used for the purpose of business are put to private use or are made available to any other person for non-business use, whether or not for a consideration. So basically, you have a laptop, you become a chartered accountant, you have a laptop, and that laptop you give it to your friend for his private use. So that is what the law is talking about here, that if you're giving your business asset, allowing the private use of it, then it will be treated as a supply of service transaction. Next is where any person ceases to be a taxable person, any goods forming part of the assets shall be deemed to be supplied by him unless business is transferred as a going concern or business is carried on by a taxable person. So basically more or less similar. If someone is closing down their business and he is disposing of, and whatever business assets which remain on that date, to that extent it will be treated as supply of goods. So this is again primarily because when the goods would have been purchased, input tax credit would have been availed on that. Today when the business is being closed, now the entity needs to pay the applicable tax on those goods to the proportion they are left unused. So this is why this entry has been put in here. Now, certain transactions which will be outrightly treated as supply of services, that is renting of immovable property, construction of a complex building civil structure, except where consideration received after completion of construction, temporary transfer or permitting the use or enjoyment of IPR, various activities relating to information technology software, agreeing to the obligation to tolerate or to refrain from an act, or transfer of right to use. So these all transactions will be treated as supply of services. Plus composite supplies. What are composite supplies? Wherein more than one type of supplies are made as a part of a single transaction. This includes works contract, that is immovable property plus transfer of property in goods, as well as supply of services and food in a restaurant other than alcohol. So these two types of transactions are to be treated as supply of services. Next, some more additions which have been made are supply of goods by an unincorporated association or body of persons to a member thereof for cash, deferred payment or other valuable consideration. So basically, an unincorporated association, you may be living in apartments, if you are living in societies. Generally, all these societies and flats, they have a residential welfare association. This residential welfare association works for the benefit of each of the member of the society. Now, this RWA, whatever they are providing, whatever services they are procuring, whatever goods they are procuring for their members, it will be treated, so basically any goods that they are procuring for their members, those will be treated as supply of goods transaction only. Next is supplies to be treated neither as supply of goods nor supply of services. So here we are discussing about those supplies which can be said to be the negative list of GST. Negative list of GST meaning neither to be treated as supply of goods nor to be treated as supply of services. And these cover services by an employee to his employer in the course or in his relation to his employment, services by any court or tribunal, services of funeral, burial or cremation, then sale of land and building completed. So here there is one distinguishing factor. If you buy an under construction property, the construction of which has not completed, usually it will be liable to GST. But if you buy a completed property, a completed house, ready to move in house, or you simply buy land, then in those cases, no GST shall be applicable. Actionable claims other than lottery, betting and gambling. So, actionable claims, so basically you can presume that lottery, betting and gambling is something which is covered under GST, but other actionable claims are excluded from GST. Then functions performed by MP, MLA, member of panchayat, members of local authorities. So all of these are basically government office holders, and these government office holders, whatever they are doing in their official capacity, will not be liable to GST. Next is, so this was a recent addition in Schedule 3, service by way of an activity in relation to a function entrusted to a panchayat or to a municipality. So any work that a panchayat or a municipality is getting done, which it is constitutionally required to do, then such transactions will also neither be treated as supply of goods nor services. Next, another important addition, interstate movement of various modes of conveyance. So let me give you an example. So let me give you an example on this, that earlier why this addition was brought in. This addition was brought in because, say suppose Indigo plane So right now the planes are not flying, but earlier in the normal course, when the planes are flying, the first flight was supposed from Delhi to Mumbai. Next flight was from Mumbai to Bangalore. Next flight from Bangalore to Kolkata, Kolkata to Assam, Guwahati, and from Guwahati to Jammu. Now, usually in a day, a plane would do 4 to 5 trips, all from one location to another. And Indigo would have a registration in Delhi, in Maharashtra, in Karnataka, in West Bengal, in Assam, in Jammu and Kashmir. So would that mean that Indigo was, and because Indigo's plane is moving from Delhi to Mumbai, would it be treated as stock transfer from Delhi to Mumbai? Similarly for trucks, there is a GTA who has an office in Delhi, has an office in Mumbai. The truck is moving from Delhi to Mumbai. Is he liable to pay tax on such movement of truck? Similarly, there are special cranes which can lift a human being, and so that he can clean the lamp posts, an electrician can do away with any fault in that lamp post. So when these cranes are moving from Delhi to Mumbai, will it be treated as stock transfer and the person will become liable to pay the applicable GST? So this was clarified that interstate movement of various modes of conveyance between distinct persons, including trains, buses, trucks, tankers, trailers, vessels, containers, aircrafts, carrying goods or passengers or boats, or for repair and maintenance, except in cases where such movement is for further supply of the same conveyance. So basically, interstate movement, unless and until it is for further supply, there will be no liability to pay any GST. This is again, so interstate movement of rigs, tools and spares and all goods on wheels. Again, if it is for further supply, then only GST will be payable. If it is not for further supply, then it will not be liable to GST, not covered under supply. And there is a residuary power which has been retained by the government, that in the future they can clarify what will be treated as supply of goods and not services, and vice versa. So with this, friends, we have concluded our discussion with respect to supply. We'll now quickly move on to composite supply and mixed supply. And before that, let me just quickly see what are the queries. Okay. Construction, if completed, it's supply of goods, right? No, construction, Gopika, once the construction is completed, it becomes immovable property and no GST is applicable on immovable property. Okay. Okay, PPT, I believe there was some issue, it has been done. Why? Okay, so there are a lot of questions on PPT. Okay, all right. Janamjay is asking what is further supply. So further supply means that Indigo is saying that bring my plane which is parked in Delhi to Mumbai because I'm selling that plane to Ambani. So basically Indigo is, then the plane is not moving for transferring of passengers or transferring of goods. Then the plane is being brought so that it can be sold to Ambani. That is further supply. Yes, Namita, you will get the PPTs at the end of the session. Manish Alok Bhargav is asking, please explain related distinct person. Related person is defined, you can see. Distinct person I've already discussed. if this session is recorded, you can go back and view. Otherwise, please refer the definition. Actionable claim is again defined. You can please see the definition, because if I start repeating for everyone, that we will not be able to even complete one session in a day. Okay. So I'm sorry, but we have very limited time and we are already running against time. Next is composite supply and mixed supply. So friends, first let us understand why was there a need to come up with the concept of composite supply and mixed supply. Composite supply and mixed supply were required because it is common in certain business segments that more than one type of supply is done in a single transaction. For example, you all become chartered accountants, you get engaged, you're about to get married. Now, when you book a venue for the function, today generally how the venues are functioning is, they will give you a per plate charge, that we will charge you 5,000 rupees per plate, plus you have to guarantee that there will be minimum 150 guests. So once you say that there will be minimum 150 guests, naturally bundled. Now, what is natural bundling? Natural bundling is one transaction and are supplied in conjunction with each other in the ordinary course of business. Like this example of banquet, hotel booking that I gave you. When I say that they charge you basis per plate, am I saying something which is not natural? Am I telling you something which is unnatural? It is perfectly natural. That is how business is happening presently. And that is where you can say, immediately you can say, okay, it is naturally bundled. It is happening in the ordinary course of business. But suppose I tell you, you go and buy a Hero cycle, and with that Hero cycle, you will get a Mercedes along with that Hero cycle. Is it natural? Can it happen in the ordinary course of business? Suppose someone tells you, go and buy an Oppo phone, or go and buy a Nokia, old Nokia, and you will get iPhone X along with it. Is it natural? Can it happen in the ordinary course of business? Certainly not. So, what is of essence here in composite supply is, it has to be naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. And if this is the case, wherein one is a principal supply, so the entire transaction of composite supply will be treated as per the principal supply. That is, the applicable tax rate on the principal supply will be applicable on the entire transaction. The applicable classification will be applicable on the entire transaction. The applicable time of supply, the applicable place of supply will apply on the entire transaction. And what is principal supply? Principal supply means the supply of goods or service which constitutes the predominant element of a composite supply, and the other supplies are ancillary. Clear what is principal supply and what is composite supply? So this is about composite supply. Some examples of composite supply are goods being packed and transported with insurance and packing material. So like Agarwal Packers and Movers. So these packers and movers, they transport all your used household goods from one location to another, and they bring in all the packing material. They give you insurance that if something happens, then we will reimburse you. So this is a classic example of composite supply, wherein the predominant element is transportation, and hence the entire transaction will be treated as a transportation of goods transaction. Warranty and maintenance contract. This is very common. You buy a laptop, TV, any electronic good, warranty and maintenance is common for few initial years. So, and otherwise there is extended warranty which is separately saleable. That's a separate service transaction. So basically when you're buying a TV and you're getting warranty and maintenance along with it, have you ever paid for the normal warranty? Have you ever paid the tax separately? No. 50,000 rupees for a TV which includes 1 year's warranty and maintenance. So that is primary principal supply is supply of TV and that hence covers the composite supply element. So these are some indicators of bundling of service. This you can see separately. This is nothing special. This I've just given as an example. So these are some illustrative indicators. Now coming to the part of mixed supply. So people in India are very intelligent, very bright CA students, very bright tax advisors. So someone is reading about composite supply and he says, okay, if I can get a transaction of 2 or more supplies to qualify as composite supply, this will mean that if I can sell a cycle with a Mercedes has a tax rate of 28% plus cess, somewhere around more than 50-60%. And cycle has a tax rate of only 12%, which means I can sell cycle plus Mercedes. The value I will give 50 lakh rupees, but I will say this is a composite supply and I will pay on the entire transaction of 50 lakh rupees only 12% GST and in comparison to 28% plus compensation cess. Law says, my dear gentlemen, don't act too smart. Why? Please let us read the concept of mixed supply. 2 or more individual supplies of goods or services or any combination thereof made in conjunction with each other by a taxable person for a single price where such supply does not constitute a composite supply. That is, first we have to see whether it is naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. Of course, a cycle and a Mercedes cannot be ordinarily naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. Hence, they get, because there is a single price of 50 lakh rupees, 2 or more individual supply, cycle is an individual supply, Mercedes is an individual supply. They are being supplied in conjunction with each other by a taxable person for a single price and they do not constitute composite supply, then it gets covered under mixed supply. And if something gets covered under mixed supply, then in such case, it will be liable to tax at the rate at which highest rate of tax is applicable on any commodity. So basically, now on this 50 lakh, wherein 49 lakh and 90,000 is the value of the Mercedes and 10,000 is the value of the cycle, together value is 50 lakh. Now this entire 50 lakh will be liable to tax at the rate of Mercedes, that is 28% GST plus compensation cess, and that will be the classification also, the time of supply, the place of supply and everything. So this, some examples have been given that in a bakery where you see that in a packet you find that there is imported chocolates, there is wafers, there is baked items and a special basket has been created to suit any person's requirement. So that may be a case. Purchase of refrigerator with storage water bottles. So again, why would storage water bottles be given with a refrigerator? So these are the cases which will get covered under mixed supply. So like when you buy a mobile phone along with a charger, that is composite supply because it is normal. However, where a bucket is being sold and tide is being given free with the bucket, that will be something as mixed supply. Not tide being sold with bucket, but or vice versa, whichever case, because that is not a normal supply. So with this, friends, we have covered our entire discussion with respect to chapter 2. I'll quickly see if there is any further queries, and we'll then move on to the next slide. Composition scheme will come as a part of this chapter 3, that is charge of GST. Sonal Swarup, yes, questions on supply. I intend to do questions on every chapter, but it's not, see, we have very limited time. And if I do separate questions on every chapter, will effectively not give you any taste of how the exam papers will come. In exam papers, they will ask you about everything, not just that supply ka ye question lijiye, charge ka ye lijiye. It's not going to happen that way. So let me complete the course and move on to RTP, effectively doing questions the way you will give it in exams, because that I think will be more suggestible. Deemed supply. So deemed supply is something wherein, actually it is not happening, but fictionally it has been done. So, जैसे supply के लिए we had discussed, there has to be a consideration. It has to be in the course of furtherance of business. It has to be by a person. Now, if all these are met, it is normal supply. If some of them are not met, but it is covered under Schedule 1, or if it is import of service not for a consideration, not in the course of furtherance of business, then that is termed as deemed supply. Sale of building and land, I've already discussed. I'm not going to discuss again. Construction material, yes, of course, GST is applicable. Why will GST not be applicable on construction material? On YouTube, so this is something you need to ask from Board of Studies. GST on gifts above rupees 50,000 will be on whole amount or just above 50,000 rupees. So this is where there is some so this is where it is understood that once you exceed 50,000 rupees, then no exemption will be available and the tax will be payable on the entire amount. But if you take this position, you can write that I'm presuming, it is clear to say that I'm presuming that no exemption will be available and hence the tax will be payable on the entire amount. PPT is disappearing because I'm looking at your queries. Okay. Composition starts with 2 or more taxable supplies, whereas mixed supplies with 2 or more individual supplies. Means it includes one exempt good as well. Yeah, Mansha, you could say so. Is GTA by road come under GST? Yes, of course. Why not? How mobile and charger is composite supply? My dear Nikita, mobile and charger is composite supply. When you go to buy a new mobile, generally the mobile charger and a hands-free is there in that packet or not. And Apple does the same, Samsung does the same, Oppo does the same, Vivo does the same, Lenovo does the same, Nokia does the same. So it is a normal course of business now. Okay, so buy one get one is not neither mixed supply nor that we will discuss in valuation chapter. Schedule 3 is not considered as exemptions. Schedule 3 is considered as negative list of GST. The difference between exemption and negative list is that exemption, when you're dealing with exemption, no input tax credit is available on tax for tax paid on purchases. Whereas when you're dealing with Schedule 3 transactions, the ITC on purchases will remain available. Zero rated and nil rated will come to that. 50,000 is in aggregate. Yes, 50,000 is in aggregate, but for per employee. Okay, so some people are saying, only few people have said, 2 or 3 people, that there is some issue regarding audibility of voice. For that, I will request you to please check your systems, because otherwise it's running the same fine. And looking at your queries, I am slightly surprised, because the idea is that you've already studied your course at least twice, and now it is simply a glance through. But looking at your questions, and if you're appearing for this recent attempt, then looking at your questions, I'm sorry to say that this session would not be sufficient, because there are too many queries and too basic queries. I'm sorry to say this, my dear friends, because if you've studied your course once or twice, these queries should not come, and then we should leave aside the course and simply focus on what queries that you have. Because if this is going to be the quantum of queries, I assure you, we cannot discuss the course and we cannot cover 100% queries. So either some of you are doing this first time and you have an attempt later in time, because if you look at the spirit of this session, it is simply to glance through the entire course, discuss the RTP, discuss the amendments, and only take up limited queries which may be there due to complication. But I'm getting simple queries. Differentiate between zero rated supply and nil rated supply. Someone is asking, what is composition levy? So this is not a query which will come from someone who has done the course once or twice and is going to appear in his attempt. I'm sorry to say this. I'll have to, because in the interest of time, I will have to move back to my PPT, because we have a lot to cover. We have already passed, I believe we have 2 hours already gone. We have 1 hour left, 1 hour 15 minutes. Charge of GST. What is the charge of GST? So charge of GST is basically, like I told you before the discussing supply, that GST is a tax, and tax is something which is brought in force by law. And for any law to become applicable, there has to be a triggering event. So the triggering event, we've all discussed and agreed under GST that triggering event is supply. And when we say supply, so the types of levies which are present under GST, there are multiple levies under GST. And for that, understanding that, we'll have to take a step back. Under GST, when various taxes were being subsumed, how did the taxation structure function when GST was not introduced or prior to introduction of GST? Earlier, there were taxes which were levied by the central government separately, and there were taxes which were levied by the state government separately. With GST, and because of that, there were a lot of problems that the taxes that you had paid at center, you wouldn't get credit at state and vice versa. So, the idea behind GST was that let us give a uniform tax across India, and let us ensure that whatever tax is being paid on purchases is available as credit to the taxpayer. But still, state governments wanted to retain a distinction so as to be able to identify the transactions on which their right is there to collect the revenue. Suppose I am within the state of Delhi. I am doing a transaction within Delhi. I'm providing services to a client within Delhi. Now, the taxes under GST which are applicable on that transaction are CGST and SGST. So CGST is the central government's revenue, SGST is the state government's revenue. But parallelly, I am doing another transaction from Delhi to Karnataka. On that transaction, that is from Delhi to Karnataka, central government remains one across India, but multiple state governments get involved. That is, Delhi government, from where the supplier is making the supply, Karnataka government, where the recipient is receiving the supply. Now, Delhi government will say, give me the tax revenue. Karnataka government will say, give me the tax revenue. It was settled that GST will be a destination-based tax. That is, the tax revenue will accrue to the state where the recipient is located. In this case, since the recipient is located in Karnataka, Bangalore, the tax revenue will accrue to the Karnataka government. But here, so as to ensure uniformity, so as to ensure that the revenue proceeds actually go on to the Karnataka government, a third levy was introduced known as IGST. IGST is nothing else but CGST plus SGST. So suppose 28% tax is applicable on a transaction, then CGST will be 14%, SGST will be 14%. But if IGST is being levied, IGST will be consolidated at 28%. Now the central government, out of this 28, central government will collect all this IGST. 14% it will retain with itself, and the balance 14% will be given to the destination state. So CGST, SGST, IGST. Similarly, there are certain areas in India which are union territory, that is, they are not governed by the state government. And those areas are Andaman and Nicobar Island, Lakshadweep, Union Territory of Chandigarh. In these areas, since the territory of state government is not applicable, here, fourth type of levy, that is UT-GST becomes applicable, and this UT-GST becomes applicable in place of SGST. So any transaction happening within Lakshadweep, it will be CGST plus UT-GST, but any transaction happening from Lakshadweep to Bangalore, the transaction will be liable to IGST. So these are the different types of levies under GST. CGST is applicable to whole of India, and when we say whole of India, it includes the territory, the landmass of India. It also includes territorial waters, seabed, subsoil, continental shelf, exclusive economic zone, or any other maritime zone, and the airspace above its territory and territorial waters. So what are the territorial waters? So suppose you're standing in Chennai, you're in Chennai and you're standing at the beach. At the beach, you're standing at the beach and you're looking towards the ocean. From there up to 12 nautical miles, it's territorial waters of India. Up to 24 nautical miles is the contiguous zone of India. And up to 200 nautical miles is the exclusive economic zone of India. And this, up to this exclusive economic zone, is where till the territory of India extends. So, up to this area, we can say that when you read about India, you can read it up to this location. And IGST again extends to whole of India, UT-GST extends to union territories. Now, what is the tax rate at which CGST is applicable? CGST, first of all, is applicable on intrastate supplies, not applicable on alcoholic liquor for human consumption. Alcoholic liquor has been kept out of GST. Value is to be determined under Section 15 of CGST Act. Rates of tax which have been notified are 0%, 0.125, 1.5, 2.5, 6, 9 and 14. So basically this is the CGST part. If we add the SGST part, this will become 3%, 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%. And since it is an indirect tax, the tax is to be collected and paid by the taxable person. Thereafter, so there are certain items which are presently outside the purview of GST. First was alcoholic liquor, and alcoholic liquor, let me tell you, will continue to be outside the GST. Why? Because alcoholic liquor, largely the taxation is restricted to state governments, and it is a major source of revenue for state governments, and that is why they have specifically kept it out of GST. But petroleum products such as petroleum crude, diesel, petrol, natural gas, aviation turbine fuel, all of this may come under GST once it is agreed in the GST Council. So presently it is not under GST, but it may come under GST. Now, this was basically where, so GST is an indirect tax, and when we talk about an indirect tax, the primary liability to collect the tax and deposit it is on the supplier. However, in certain cases, the liability is shifted onto the recipient. And the cases where this liability is shifted onto the recipient is known as reverse charge. In reverse charge cases, the supplier is no longer liable to pay the applicable tax. It is the recipient who is liable to charge and deposit the applicable tax. Not charge, but he will be self-depositing this tax with the government. And there are multiple types of reverse charge under GST. First is that provided by section 9 subsection 3. That we can say a specific reverse charge. Why do I say a specific reverse charge? Because under section 9 subsection 3 of CGST Act, specific supplies of goods along with specified types of supply of goods, specific types of supply of services, with specification of service providers and service recipient, have been covered under the gamut of liability to pay tax under reverse charge. There is another type of reverse charge provided by section 9 subsection 4, which was relatively a general reverse charge. That is, wherein any unregistered person is supplying goods or services to a registered person. This was initially introduced in GST, but thereafter it has been suspended, and as on date it has a very limited application. Some of you, I could see in the chat, were saying that please explain in Hindi. मैं समझाना चाहता हूं हिंदी में. I want to explain in Hindi. But then we have friends from South, from all over country, and I believe English is the only language which is accessible to everyone. और मैं अगर इंग्लिश में भी बोलूं और हिंदी में भी बोलूं, then that would mean that I will be attributing double time to the same discussion. And somewhere there is a direction also to cover the entire thing in English. So I am sorry, but I have restrictions. मैं मजबूर हूं कि मेरे को इंग्लिश में ही डिस्कशन करना पड़ेगा. And for you also, my dear friends, I would request you to please I'm telling you that if you want to thrive as a professional or as an individual, कहीं ना कहीं आपको इंग्लिश के साथ कंफर्टेबल होना पड़ेगा, because giving examinations is one thing, but building a future and building a position for yourself is altogether a different thing. So please focus on becoming as strong as you can with your English language, both in written as well as oral. So, and the another type, third type of reverse charge is specific to e-commerce operators. So, wherein services being supplied by e-commerce operators, then such operators were liable to pay the tax under reverse charge. So, there are three types of reverse charge which are provided under GST. So, first we are discussing the specific type of reverse charge provided by section 9 subsection 3. First, discussing the goods which are covered under reverse charge. So, goods, if you see, cashew nuts, beedi wrapper leaves, tendu leaves, tobacco leaves. So these three, if an agriculturist is supplying to a registered person, then the registered person is liable to pay the applicable tax. Similarly, silk yarn, if a manufacturer is supplying, then the registered person is liable to pay tax. Supply of lottery. So in certain states, first of all, lottery is illegal in a lot of states, legal in only limited states. In those states, generally it is run by the state government, and if the state government or union territory or local authority is supplying that lottery, then it is the lottery distributor or selling agent who is liable to pay the applicable GST and the reverse charge. Similarly, vehicles seized or confiscated or cleared as waste and scrap by the government authority, that is central government, state government, union territory or local authority, then the person who is receiving such goods, that registered person needs to pay the applicable tax under GST under reverse charge. Similarly, priority sector lending certificate, which is supplied by any registered person, the recipient registered person needs to pay such tax under reverse charge. And now we go on to discuss the services which are specifically covered under reverse charge by section 9 subsection 3. Here I'll just request you 2 minutes of time. We'll take a break of just 2 minutes and we'll be back with our session. Just 2 minutes break. Circling back our circling back our discussion, services which are covered under reverse charge. First and the most important, the most discussed service is GTA service. Any GTA who has not paid CGST at 6%, meaning thereby effective tax at 12%. In such case, the recipient of service, that is the factory, society, cooperative society, registered person, body corporate, partnership firm, casual taxable person located in the taxable territory, will be liable to pay the applicable GST under reverse charge. So these all you will have to learn. Remember, important point, that when we are going to discuss recipient of service, somewhere it may say that it is only on registered person, somewhere it may say on taxable person. Here it says factory, society, cooperative society, body corporate, partnership firm. So usually they may not be registered person, they may not be even taxable person. Simply they may be a factory or a society or a cooperative society, but still they will be liable to pay the applicable tax under reverse charge. And if they are liable to pay the applicable tax under reverse charge, they get covered under mandatory registration. And mandatory registration meaning that they will then have to complete all the obligations as a normal registered taxpayer. Similarly, legal services by advocate, whether it be representation or advisory, be it by an individual advocate or senior advocate or firm of advocates, the liability is on a business entity. Business entity, not registered person, not taxable person, but a business entity. Services supplied by an arbitral tribunal to a business entity. An arbitral tribunal supplying services to a business entity, the business entity is liable to pay the tax under reverse charge as the recipient. Next is person liable to pay tax under GTA service. So under GTA service, the options we have consolidated in this one slide. If someone is paying tax at the rate of 12% under forward charge, then it is the supplier GTA who is liable to pay tax under forward charge. Forward charge meaning normal charge, normal way meaning I am a chartered accountant, I provide services, I raise a bill of 1 lakh rupees plus the applicable GST, and that becomes 1 lakh plus applicable GST. So that is the normal way of charging GST. So that will be available to a GTA also, provided he charges tax at the rate of 12%. However, if the GTA is not charging the tax at the rate of 12%, then the tax on GTA services will be payable at the rate of 5%. By whom? By the recipient. And if recipient is one of the specified recipients, that is factory, society, cooperative society, body corporate, partnership firm, they have to pay the applicable GST under reverse charge. If recipient is other than specified recipient, that is unregistered individual consumer. So suppose your parent, your father is a government servant, and generally government servants have transferable jobs. So you're getting transferred from one location to another, and due to that transfer, you're shifting your used household goods from one location to another. So this is a case which will not get covered under either of the categories. So here neither factory, nor society, nor cooperative society, neither body corporate, nor partnership firm. So that case, my dear friend, gets covered under exemption. So there is a specific exemption that if the recipient is unregistered individual consumer, then he becomes exempt from GST in case of GT. Clear? Similarly, sponsorship service, any person providing sponsorship service to a body corporate or partnership firm, that body corporate or partnership firm is liable to pay the applicable tax under reverse charge. Next is service supplied by central government, state government, union territory or local authority to a business entity, excluding renting of immovable property. So basically, services supplied by central government, state government to or union territory or local authority to any business entity, the business entity will be liable to pay the applicable tax under reverse charge. Now here you will see the renting of immovable property is excluded, but then it is included in the next entry. So renting of immovable property by a central government, state government, union territory or local authority to any registered person. So see, this is the fine difference, and this is where you can easily get tricked in the examination. Earlier, there is an entry dealing with central government, state government, union territory or local authority, but here it says any business entity. But when you see here, it says any registered person. So this is the distinction that you will have to keep in mind. You will have to recall it at the right time. You will have to mug it up and learn it by heart. Next is services offered by a director, then the company is liable to pay under reverse charge. By an insurance agent to a person carrying on insurance business, the insurance business is liable. Recovery agent services, then the banking company is liable. Transfer of copyrighted content by an author, music composer, photography, artist or the like, then it is the publisher or the music company producer located in the taxable territory. Here, author has been highlighted in red because for author, with respect to author, there has been a recent amendment, and the recent amendment says that the author now has an option to charge the applicable GST as a normal supplier and deposit the same with the government. And if he does so, then the recipient or the publisher will not be liable to deposit the applicable GST under reverse charge. But there are certain conditions, and those conditions are that copyright should be covered within the section 139 subsection 1 clause A of the Copyright Act, and a declaration and registration needs to be obtained so that you can clearly read it out and you have to remember this. Further services covered under reverse charge are service supplied by member of overseeing committee of RBI. So RBI is liable to pay under the reverse charge. So then banks or NBFCs, they have direct selling agents. So these selling agents sell their products like home loan, auto loan, personal loan. So in these cases where they are individual DSAs, then the banking company or the NBFC, that is the non-banking financial corporation, becomes liable to deposit the applicable GST. Next is service provided by business facilitator to a banking company. In such cases, it is the banking company. So basically here, when we talk about agents, business facilitator, agent of a business correspondent, so basically what you can imagine is every bank may have hundreds of direct selling agents. A banking company may have hundreds of business facilitators. So one way was that the liability was pinned on the individual business facilitator. That would have meant hundreds of registration, thousands of returns. Rather, it is easier to govern a single big entity and to make them liable to pay the applicable tax. Also, these direct selling agents, business facilitators, are small taxpayers. And hence, by getting them covered under reverse charge, they are actually being allowed ease of doing business. And hence, the liability is shifted to the recipient of service. Agent service and agent of business correspondent, the recipient will be liable. Next is security services. So any person other than body corporate, the liability shall be on the registered person located in the taxable territory. Transfer of development rights of floor space index for construction of a project by a promoter. So the liability shall be on the promoter. So this is specific to real estate. That is transfer of development right or long-term lease of land. So basically what happens is, suppose, and this model is very common, suppose someone has a huge tract of land at a very good location, central location, and he is doing nothing with that area. Now builder comes and sees that land and he sees great potential in that land. So he approaches that landowner and tells him that, listen, you have this wonderful piece of land. Allow me to construct a high-rise building on this. I believe I can construct 100 flats. Sell each flat for 1 crore. Put together, we will unlock the value of 100 crores. 50 crores you can take away as value of land and 50 crores I will retain as my development charge. But the builder says, today I can pay you nothing. I am unable to pay you any amount because if I have to pay you 50 crore rupees today, then there will be no money left for doing the construction. Let me construct it. And when we construct these flats and when we sell it to the public, once the money starts coming in, from that proceeds, I will pay you the amount. And the landowner agrees to it. So basically, the transaction is of transfer of development rights or giving long-term lease of land. And in such case, the liability to pay the tax has been shifted on the builder or the promoter. New services which have been covered under reverse charge are renting of motor vehicle services to a body corporate. So the condition is that the supplier should be other than body corporate, that is, he should not be a company. The tax should be 5%, wherein CGST will be 2.5, SGST will be 2.5. And input tax credit only of input service in the same line of business should have been availed. If all these conditions are satisfied, and if the recipient is a body corporate, then it will be the recipient who will be liable to deposit the applicable GST under reverse charge. Next is services of lending of securities under securities lending scheme, wherein, so basically this security lending scheme is where, suppose I have some securities, I would then give it to SEBI. So basically, lender is a person who deposits the security registered in his name on the name of any other person duly authorized in this behalf with an approved intermediary. So basically, SEBI has intermediary so as to allow lending of securities. So suppose there are some securities registered in my name. I give it to that intermediary that you please go ahead and lend these. Intermediary identifies a person and gives the securities to him. Now, in the earlier scheme of things, the person who has taken these securities, the details were revealed to me because only then could I issue a GST invoice. And this was a problem for the intermediary because once the lender and the lendee get connected, why would they want to interact with the intermediary? And hence, now, so as to save this business model, the liability to pay the applicable GST has been shifted on the borrower. That is, a person who borrows the securities under the scheme through an approved intermediary of SEBI. So this is about what are the levies under GST, what are the various rates of tax, what are various types of reverse charges under GST, and now my friend was asking, one of our friend was asking whether or not I'll cover composition levy. So my dear friend, here is where we are now going to discuss composition levy. Before we go on to discuss composition levy, and I'm intentionally not looking at queries, we have to cover composition levy, we have to cover time of supply, and then the time that is left we'll attribute to your queries. And most of the queries, so I had done the regular batch for ICAI, I had done the previous revision classes for ICAI. Those students who had studied from me in the regular course, I don't believe I would have been seeing the same kind of queries which I'm seeing from in the list. So, but it's your right to ask the query. I'm not denying that, but it's for me to see that we effectively utilize the time that we have. Okay. So, moving on to the composition levy. Now, what happens is, friends, in India, we are a vast geography, and the majority of the taxpayers, a huge section of the taxpayers, are very small in size. Very small in size meaning that they have very limited means of business and they cannot afford to undertake the regular compliances. They cannot be aware about the regular scheme of compliance. They cannot pay tax at the usual rates of taxes. So for these small taxpayers, government has historically given a benefit of composition levy. So basically under VAT also there was a concept of composition levy, that any person who is small taxpayer and his turnover is within that limited frame, within that restricted frame which is allowed, then that taxpayer has an option to choose the composition levy. And if he chooses the composition levy, this means that that person will need not undertake such detailed compliances under the law. He can simply move away with doing simplified compliances as are applicable for composition levy. So, let us please discuss composition levy. So, the conditions for the composition levy are that the aggregate turnover should not be more than 1.5 crores during the preceding financial year. And in specified cases, specified category of states, it should not be more than 75 lakhs. So, usually the turnover limit is 1.5 crores. However, in specified category states, it is only 75 lakhs. So, anyone who is above this bracket, who is doing turnover more than this, is disentitled from composition scheme. The next condition is that once you opt for composition scheme, the tax should not be collected from the recipient. That is, you cannot collect any tax from the recipient. Another condition is no input tax credit will be available. No input tax credit whatsoever of the tax paid on purchases will be available to the taxpayer. And composition scheme to be availed by all registered persons having same time. So suppose I am a registered person. Suppose there is a Mr. X who is a registered person. Mr. X has a location in Delhi, has a location in Mumbai, has a location in Bangalore, has a location in Kolkata. And he says, and all the 4 locations have same PAN number. Now Mr. X says, for Delhi and Mumbai, I want to opt for the composition scheme. For Kolkata and Bangalore, I will continue under the regular scheme. Can it be so? It cannot be so. Composition scheme, if once availed, will be applicable throughout all the locations where the same PAN number is applicable, plus the turnover will be the aggregate turnover for all the locations put together. Okay? Now, there are certain non-eligible supplies, that is, once you are covered in the composition levy, you cannot engage in supplies of these. What is this? Supply of service more than 10% of turnover or INR 5 lakh, whichever is higher. So basically, composition levy, this composition levy is, right now the composition levy that we're talking about is primarily for supplier of goods. However, it is usual that any supplier of goods also undertakes some supply of services. So the law has allowed that up to 5 lakh rupees in a financial year or up to 10% of turnover, whichever is higher, the supplier can undertake supply of services. But if he starts providing services more than that, so someone has a turnover of suppose 1.4 crores and he is supplying services of 15 lakh, 15 lakh, which means he has crossed the 10% turnover threshold, then he will not be entitled for composition levy. Next is the person cannot supply goods which are not leviable to tax under GST. So basically, non-taxable goods cannot be supplied by a person who is covered under composition. They cannot undertake interstate supplies. So they can only undertake intrastate within the state supply. They cannot undertake supplying goods through an e-commerce operator. So they cannot engage in supply of any goods through e-commerce operator, and it is also not available to the manufacturer of what? Anything which is bad for your teeth or your mouth. What is bad for your teeth? Ice cream. If you eat too much ice cream, you will get cavity. Pan masala. If someone is eating so much pan masala and tobacco, they will get cancer. So basically, manufacturer of ice cream, pan masala and tobacco, anything which is not good for your mouth, that has been restricted under composition. Some more conditions and restrictions. Composition taxpayer can neither be a casual taxpayer. What is casual we will discuss in registration chapter. They cannot be a non-registered taxable person. Similarly, they cannot purchase any goods from unregistered taxpayer. If they make any purchases from unregistered taxpayer, they have to pay the applicable tax under reverse charge. They are also liable to pay tax under reverse charge like a normal taxpayer, that is under section 9 subsection 3, 9 subsection 4. They should not be engaged in manufacture of notified goods. What is notified goods? Ice cream, pan masala and tobacco, things which are not good for your mouth. Next is words composition taxable person not eligible to collect tax on supplies should be mentioned on every bill of supply. So a person covered under composition levy cannot issue a tax invoice. It can only issue a bill of supply, and these words should be mentioned on that bill of supply. Words composition taxable person should be displayed at the place of business so that anyone and everyone who deals with such composition taxpayer gets to know outrightly that they are dealing with a composition taxable person. Clear to everyone till here? So the turnover limit By notification 14/2019, the usual limit is 1.5 crores. However, in case of special category states, that is Arunachal, Uttarakhand, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim and Tripura, it is restricted to 75 lakhs. However, in case of Assam, Himachal and Jammu, the usual limit of 1.5 crores shall be applicable. Now, what will be the inclusions and exclusions from turnover? All outward supplies, including taxable, exempt, exports, interstate, and will be computed on all India basis. Exclusions will be tax paid under GST, value of inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge because those are purchases, any interest income, these will not be considered. So this is, we've already discussed 10% of turnover or 5 lakhs. The provision of services has been allowed up to this limit. Interest income is to be excluded. This we've already discussed. Effective rate of tax for manufacturer and traders, it is 1%. For restaurant service providers, it is 5%. Now, another composition scheme was introduced, and this composition scheme was introduced for service providers. For service providers with turnover up to 50 lakh rupees, an option was provided to pay tax at concessional rate of 6%. So usually services are taxed at the rate of 18%, but an option has been given in law to allow to pay tax at the rate of 6%. And the same restrictions as applicable in case of composition taxpayer, the same restrictions are applicable even in case of this scheme. Okay? And there has been one more addition to the list of restricted items, which the manufacturer of which cannot offer composition scheme. And we had discussed something which is not good for your mouth. Ice cream gives cavity, pan masala, tobacco gives cancer, and aerated water. What is aerated water? That is soft drink. So aerated water has also been excluded, and aerated water is a recent inclusion in the list of exclusions. Okay? So this is also excluded. Now, section 9 subsection 4. So, section 9 subsection 4, I had told you, generally section 9 subsection 4 talks about where unregistered person supplying to registered person liable to pay applicable tax under reverse charge, but it remains suspended. And this has now been amended to provide that government will now specify a class of registered person, and in respect of supply of specified categories of goods or services or both, wherein this section will now be applicable. So earlier, this was generally applicable universally. Any unregistered person supplying to registered person liable to pay the applicable tax under reverse charge. But now, it is only applicable on a specific class of registered persons, and that too for specified categories of goods or services or both. And with this, friends, we have concluded our discussion pertaining to chapter 3 also, and I'll take up 5 minutes for queries. I'll take up what are important queries. So Mayank is asking what happens if a person crosses the 10% limit or rupees 5 lakhs. So in that case, the moment he crosses that, he will be disentitled from the composition scheme. Notification 2/2019, my dear friend Ayushi, is the notification through which the scheme of composition for service providers, that is, with turnover up to 50 lakh rupees and to pay tax at the rate of 6%, was introduced. So, Varun, the question that you are asking is something which needs to be determined on a case-to-case basis. Okay, it cannot be a case-wise study. We cannot say. So, what you need to see is whether it is happening in the regular course of business, or is it first of all happening in the ordinary course of business and it is naturally bundled. Okay. Because if it is not, then it is certainly not, it will not qualify as composition scheme. Sri Vaidya is asking what is turnover up to rupees 50 lakh? Again, very surprising to hear it from someone who is going to appear in this next attempt. 50 lakh rupees is the limit of turnover of composition, allowing service providers to opt for composition scheme. So for supplier of goods, the limit is 1.5 crores. For supplier of services, it is 50 lakh. Compensation levy tax rates 1% is CGST plus SGST. So IGST will be 1%, CGST will be 0.5%. So Abhinandan, no. When a composition taxpayer makes a supply to a registered taxable person, he cannot charge any tax on his bill of supply. He simply pays tax on his aggregate turnover out of his own pocket. Since no tax is charged on bill of supply, the recipient cannot avail any ITC. So sweet shop are charging 5% GST because normally also 5% tax is being provided for them other than compositions. Retailer cannot offer 3% scheme in composition because the 3% is only available for service providers. Paintings sold donated to relief fund. See, donation, supplying free of cost, we will discuss that in the ITC chapter. But let me tell you, donation means whatever donation or whatever is being supplied free of cost, that is liable to GST. Yeah, Mayank, you are right. Gulam Ahmed Raza, your question is 1,50,000 is aggregate for all branches. 1,50,000 or 1.5 crores? So 1.5 crores is aggregate for all branches. Thank you, Shailesh. Screen not visible. Of course, I'm answering queries. How will the screen be visible? Yeah, Garima, I intend to do so. So I'm moving back to the discussion to the PPT now. Okay. So now we are moving on to the discussion pertaining to time of supply of goods. Time of supply, my dear friends, why is time of supply relevant under GST? Time of supply is relevant under GST because there may be multiple events for a particular transaction. Now, be it goods, be it services, I will give you a common example. Suppose, in case of goods transaction, first of all, a purchase order is raised from the supplier. Thereafter, an agreement is formed. After the agreement, some advance is given from the recipient. Post receipt of advance, goods are cleared from the factory. Goods are received by the recipient. Thereafter, the payment is received. Similarly, in case of services, someone may ask me for provision of service. I will agree over the mail. He may pay me some advance. I may raise an invoice. I will provide services. Then I will receive the final payment. So put together in a transaction, you will see 8 to 10 different aspects of where you can say that the tax, when to pay the tax. The question arises, when should I pay the tax? Should it be when the PO is raised, when the agreement is finalized, when the advance is received, when the invoice is raised, when the goods are cleared or the services are provided, or when the final payment is received, when should we do? So that is why the government has clearly prescribed that what events need to be considered and occurrence of which at the earliest needs to be considered for the purposes of payment of time. So under section 12 of CGST, so we are discussing section 12. Section 12 says the liability to pay tax on goods shall arise at the time of supply as determined in terms of the provision of this section. And what does this say? Earliest of the following. What is the earliest? Date of issue of invoice by the supplier, or the last date on which he is required to issue invoice, or date of receipt of payment. So 3 events have been captured with respect to supply of goods. First is issuance of invoice. Second is the last date of issuance of invoice as per section 31. And third is receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Now suppose, practically, one thing that you need to keep in mind is this third condition, that is date of receipt of payment, has practically become redundant in case of supply of goods. Why? Because this date of receipt of payment will only be captured when this is received in advance. अगर मैं किसी को गुड सप्लाई कर रहा हूं, 1st of May को मैंने इनवॉइस रेज करा, 2nd May को मेरी लास्ट डेट थी इनवॉइस रेज करने की, 3rd of May को मेरे को पेमेंट आ गया. तो मेरे लिए कौन सा डेट हो गया टाइम ऑफ सप्लाई? 1st of May, विच इज द डेट ऑफ इनवॉइस. 1st of May मेरा लास्ट डेट था इनवॉइस रेज करने का, 2nd of May को मैं इनवॉइस रेज कर रहा हूं, 3rd of May को मेरे को पेमेंट आ गया. विच इज द फर्स्ट डेट? द फर्स्ट डेट विल बी द लास्ट डेट टू इश्यू इनवॉइस, दैट इज 1st May. थर्ड एग्जाम्पल, 1st May को मेरे को एडवांस आ गया, आई रिसीव्ड द एडवांस. 2nd May को आई एम रेजिंग द इनवॉइस. 3rd May is the last date for issuance of invoice. What will be the time of supply? In this case, it will be 2nd of May. Why? Because as per notification 66/2017, all the taxpayers are exempted from paying GST at the time of receipt of advance in relation to supply of goods. So basically, in case of goods, if you receive any advance, no liability to pay GST, and hence this condition becomes redundant. So practically, you need to just look at two things. One is date of issuance of invoice, and second is the last date to issue the invoice. And what is the last date to issue the invoice as per section 31? As per section 31, the last date to issue invoice is before or at the time of removal of goods, where the goods are movable, or if the goods are being made available at the site, suppose installation of lift, installation of central AC or something like that, then it should be before the time of being made available. So basically, it should be either the date of invoice or before the goods have been removed or made available. Clear? Furthermore, another category is continuous supply of goods. So basically, someone has a year-long agreement with a supplier that you need to supply the goods throughout the year to me. And for this, they have a year-long agreement wherein the goods are being continuously supplied, successive statements are issued, successive payments are involved. In this case, the last date to issue invoice will be before or at the time each statement is issued, or such payment is received. So, in normal cases, it is before or at the time of removal or before or at the time of being made available. However, in case of continuous supply, it is either before a statement is issued or before payment is received. However, in case of goods being sent on approval, so what happens, my dear friends, is in case of a new product, so we all know Fevicol, we all know Iodex. Now, suppose someone is selling you a new product and you say, no, I want Fevicol. So, the new product, generally, there is no acceptance in the market. So, what happens is that these new product manufacturers ask their agents to request the retailer to allow them to display it on their counter. And by displaying it at their counter, the agent says, don't pay me anything, my dear friend. I am leaving the product here with you. See if you can sell something. If you can sell it, pay me for that amount. If you are unable to sell, I'll come back to you and I'll take away whatever is unsold. The shopkeeper thinks, okay, what is there for me to lose? The product will sell itself. If it doesn't sell, I will return it. So, for these kinds of sales, these are known as sale on approval basis. And because these are regular and commercial in nature, the law has also considered this, that we cannot say that you pay the tax whereas actually the goods have not been sold. So the law says that in case of sale on approval, we will give you 6 months time period. 6 months time period meaning that from the date of removal, within 6 months, if the supply is confirmed, raise an invoice there and then, or bring back the goods within 6 months. If nothing happens and 6 months expire, then we will deem that the 6 months, at the expiry of 6 months, that the goods have been supplied. And accordingly, the invoice will have to be raised in such transactions. So the law says, notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, where the goods being sent or taken in approval for sale or return are removed before the supply takes place, the invoice shall be issued before or the time of supply or 6 months from the date of removal, whichever is earlier. So, I'm sorry, I had to just take a 10 seconds break. So, this is the last date for issuance of invoice. So, quickly to recap, in case of normal supply of goods, it is either before removal or being made available. In case of continuous supply of goods, it is before the issuance of each statement or receipt of payment. Whereas in case of sale on approval basis, it is relaxation is allowed up to 6 months, provided the goods have been sold prior to that. Okay. So here is a consolidated sheet where it involves movement before or at the time of removal, does not involve movement before at the time delivery or making available. Continuous supply of goods, successive statement of accounts are involved before at the time of each statement. Continuous supply of goods, successive payments are involved before at the time each payment is received. Goods sent on approval before at the time of supply or 6 months from the date of removal, whichever is earlier. Now, there are certain special considerations which have been put in. First consideration is that what happens if the invoice was for 10,000 rupees, but 11,000 rupees has been paid by mistake by the recipient. So that is only 1,000 rupees in excess. The invoice could be for 1 lakh and payment is 1 lakh 1,000. Invoice could be for 10 lakh and the payment has been 10 lakh 1,000. It is no 10%, nothing, only 1,000 in excess. So if you are paying 1,000 rupees in excess have been received, then the law says no need to worry. Retain the tax for this 1,000 rupees, pay the tax, thereafter, as and when you make further supplies, adjust this 1,000 rupees and pay the tax liability there and then. So a relaxation has been given for 1,000 rupees. Thereafter, if the total supply, I have agreed with the vendor that I will supply services of 10 crore rupees to him. And if I am going to supply services worth 10 crore rupees, presently, so 1 crore rupees per month, I have a return receipt arrangement. And for entire year, it is going to be 12 crore rupees. I am supplying services for this month, that is 1 crore. Next month, 1 crore. I am raising the invoice for the month of April for 1 crore rupees. Do I need to pay the tax on 1 crore? The time of supply will be applicable on 1 crore or on the entire 12 crores? Of course, on 1 crore only. So, does not matter what is the total value of supply. The time of supply is only be applicable to the extent of value being presently billed or invoiced. Okay. Next is date of receipt of payment. So what will be the date of receipt of payment? The date of receipt of payment shall be earlier of date of entry in books of accounts or date of credit to bank account, whichever is earlier. And these three things, please keep it in mind because these three exact same things are relevant for time of supply for service provisions also. So they are common to both. Okay. Presently we are discussing time of supply for goods. We have discussed time of supply for goods under normal course or forward charge. Now we are going to discuss time of supply for goods covered under reverse charge. What are goods covered under reverse charge? Cashew nuts, tendu leaves, lottery. Okay, so those things that we have discussed. Now for those, the time of supply will be the earliest of date of receipt of goods, date of payment in the books of accounts, or date of debit in the bank account, or 31st day from the date of issue of invoice, or any other document by the supplier. So basically we have to look at the date of receipt of goods, date of payment or debit in bank account, or 31st day from the date of issue of invoice, and basis that the earliest date will be treated as the date as time of supply. And if for any reason the time of supply is not determinable under either of these, then date of entry of goods in books of accounts of the recipient of the supply shall be taken as the time of supply applicable for that transaction. Clear, my dear friend? Next is supply of voucher. So what is a voucher? You would recall that when you used to go to Domino's, you used to get a voucher that today you are purchasing this meal, and if you come back to us, you can show this voucher and you will get a farmhouse pizza, medium size, free of cost. Similarly, when you go to Shoppers Stop, you get a voucher sometimes if there is a scheme going on that if you buy goods worth 10,000 rupees today, you will get a voucher worth 2,000 rupees and you can come back later and redeem that voucher for 2,000 rupees. Now the question arises, what will be the time of supply with respect to such vouchers? So the law says, if the supply is identified at the time of issue of voucher, for example, Domino's gives you a voucher that you can come back with this voucher and get a free farmhouse pizza medium size normal crust. no extra cheese. Some of you are already now drooling about the pizza, ain't you? So, since it is very specific, the voucher is very specific that you will get a farmhouse medium-sized pizza, and the supply is identifiable at the time of issuance of voucher, the time of supply will be the date of issuance of voucher, and Domino's will need to pay the tax at the time of issuance of voucher itself. Whereas, if the supply is not identifiable, so the shopper stock voucher, now the shopper stock voucher of 2000 rupees, you can go back, you might buy shoes, you might buy a bag, you might buy a shirt, you might buy a trouser, you might buy a blazer. So you could buy anything. Not sure what you will buy. So since the supply is not identifiable, the tax will be payable on the date of redemption of it. That is when you are actually using that voucher. And some of you may now question that what happens if that Domino's voucher is not redeemed? Domino's is unnecessarily paid excess tax. So my dear, every taxpayer is smart. They have stopped issuing specific supply vouchers. If you go and notice now, no specific supply vouchers are being issued now. They are only being issued open-ended, which you can redeem only at the time of actual utilization. And the last provision is that if for any reason whatsoever the time of supply cannot be determined in accordance with the above provisions, in such case, the time of supply will be determined in accordance with where a periodical return is to be filed, the date on which such return is to be filed, or in any other case, the date on which tax is paid. So, this is the time of supply provision with respect to the supply of goods. Now, you all must also be aware that even interest, late fee and penalty. So, generally what happens is that Hindustan Unilever, when it is supplying goods to its dealers, retailers, they give a fixed period for making the payment. And that fixed period is that you need to make the payment within 30 days. If the dealer retailer does not make the payment within 30 days, then they charge some amount as interest or late fee or penalty. Now the law says that such late fee, interest or penalty will also be liable to GST, will also be covered under GST. However, one relaxation which has been given under the law is that the applicable tax on such interest, late fee or penalty only needs to be paid once these amounts have actually been received by the supplier. So until unless these amounts are actually received, there is no liability to pay any tax on the supplier. So time of supply of services, I believe we have only 5-7 minutes left, so I would not want to rush it. I would rather prefer it because our session ends at 10. I would rather prefer it to take it in the evening session. I will quickly give you a recap and then again move on to the queries. One important thing that you need to remember is time of supply only gives you the date. So suppose I've issued an invoice on 1st of May. Last date of issuing the invoice was 15th of May for goods, normal case. So the date of supply becomes 1st of May. But does that mean I need to pay the applicable tax on 1st of May itself? No. Why? Because the law says that you can deposit tax up till 20th of the next month. So basically, I just need to identify time of supply so as to know what is my liability for the entire month of May. Because the law does not require for you to pay your tax every day. No, the law says you have to pay your tax on a monthly basis. Monthly basis meaning from 1st May till 31st of May, whatever time of supplies have occurred, you need to pay the applicable tax on that. And that too you can do 20th of the next month, that is 20th of May. Okay, and without any interest, you can pay up till 20th of May. So, time of supply helps us in identifying the date on which the liability has crystallized on us. Now we have become liable, but it does not mean that same day I need to rush to the bank to deposit that. No, that is not the case. Now let me look at all the wonderful queries that have come from my bright students. 547 is the number. Now I understand there is some relating to your anger, relating to technical issues and everything, but just look at the number, 547 for a 3-hour session. So you have no option but to excuse me that it's really difficult to share that. So people are saying, please upload presentation. My dear friends, these PPTs I have made for you and you and you only. Madhav, Saikaran, Sai Kaushik, Devendra Kumar. These PPTs shall be available to you most certainly. Madhav Gupta, I have not yet come to time of supply of service provisions. Why are you moving ahead? I will cover that in the evening session. What all to be included in all other documents by the supplier in case of your query is not clear, Nutan, redraft it. Adesh, sir, kindly tell the difference of renting of immovable property in both the case, which can be a tricky part. See, if renting of immovable property, so first of all you need to understand, renting of immovable property is only liable to tax when the property is being used for commercial purposes. If the property is residential and is being used for residential purposes, no GST. Whereas residential property being used for commercial purpose, liable to GST. Second thing is renting of immovable property by a central government, state government, union territory or local authority to a business just let me quickly see through. Even, this can be the tricky part. So it's specific to a certain category, and if you get covered under that category, okay, so it says any registered person. So basically, suppose if there is X Limited who has taken some property from the central government on rent, but they are not registered under GST. So they are not liable to pay GST under reverse charge. But there is Mr. X who is registered under GST, has taken immovable property on rent from state government. Since he is already registered under GST, he is liable to pay the applicable GST under reverse charge. I hope this makes it clear. The composition scheme is any restriction imposed on interstate inward supply. Madhav, my understanding is that composition taxpayer cannot make interstate purchases also. So, there is some difference of opinion on that, on interstate purchases. But I believe the specific restriction which is there is that he cannot make any interstate supplies. Vinod is asking, please explain the stock transfer. Is it supply or not? Vinod, stock transfer means that Hindustan Unilever Delhi is supplying goods to Hindustan Unilever Mumbai. That is a distinct person specifically covered under Schedule 1. Yes, it will be treated as supply, and yes, the applicable GST has to be paid. Tabassum is asking if an entity has different branches. Very good question. One in general state, another in special category states. Then what will be the limit? Wonderful question, Tabassum. This is what I wanted to tell myself. Tabassum is asking, my entity has a location in Delhi, also has a location in Meghalaya. One location and total turnover is 1 crore. Now whether for composition I will consider 1.5 crore or 75 lakh. Tabassum, we will have to consider the lower limit, and the lower limit will be 75 lakhs because the turnover is 1 crore in my case. Both the locations will be disentitled from composition scheme. Himanshi is asking, is the provision in restitutory applicable in all the provisions when we are not able to determine the time of supply, or is it only for voucher? It is applicable for all the provisions. Wherever you cannot apply the specific rule for any reason, not availability of details, not availability of details as are required, then you can come to the general provision. Akash is asking, sir, transport or freight charges, RCM applicable? Yes, Akash. Transport or freight are general terms. GTA is the specific term. GTA where a consignment note is issued. Generally, if he is not charging tax at the rate of 12%, then it is the recipient who will be liable to pay the tax under reverse charge. Okay, Raghavendra is saying I can extend the class up to 10:30 am. That's wonderful. In fact, then I will cover the time of supply under reverse charge. Thank you for mentioning that, Raghavendra. Let me take queries then for another 5 minutes. Anmol is asking, what if a person registered under composition scheme and make a supply under RCM from person under normal levy? Anmol, your question is not clear. Please redraft. Prasad Pradeep is asking, what if the unregistered person received RCM services? If unregistered person receives RCM services, then he will become liable to obtain registration and pay the applicable tax under reverse charge. Provided I am cautioning you, Prasad Pradeep, that unregistered person will only become liable where in reverse charge it says that recipient being any business entity, like in case of legal services. In case of legal services, it says if the recipient is a business entity. It does not say a registered taxpayer. Like in case of renting of immovable property by the government, there it says a registered person. So in that case, unregistered person will not be liable. But if it is on a business entity, then even if he is unregistered, he needs to obtain registration and pay the tax. Okay, Mohit, I'll look into that. Welcome, Tabassum. Raj is asking for service under reverse charge mechanism. Composite supply. Is it at composite rate or normal rate? So, I believe you are asking about composition taxpayer, Raj. And any services which the composition taxpayer receives, which are covered under reverse charge mechanism, he needs to pay the applicable tax at full rate under reverse charge mechanism. The reduced rate is only available for his outward turnover. Abhinandan is asking, a registered person makes a supply to B, composition levy. Well, this I've already answered, I'm not going to repeat it. Paris is asking, in case of GTA, if he is charging 5% RCM and 18% GST as forward tax also, then in such case exemption is allowed in case service being provided to unregistered person of transportation. You have mixed too many things, Paris. Let me clarify to you. If the GTA is first of all charging tax at the rate of 12%, there is no liability on the recipient. If he is not charging at 12%, recipient is liable under reverse charge. If the recipient is unregistered person using for personal consumption, then there is a specific exemption. I'll take last three queries and we'll move back to our topic. Nishtha is asking, if a composition levy makes supply to a person covered under RCM, what is the treatment? Who is the person covered under RCM, Nishtha? This reverse charge mechanism is applicable specific on persons, right? So what does it mean that composition levy makes supply to a person? If he makes supply to a person covered under RCM, RCM is not general or universal. RCM is for specific transactions. Please read the questions that you are drafting. It seems that you do not have a complete understanding of the law per se. Composition levy person needs to pay tax on his entire turnover. And person, separately the person who is covered under reverse charge mechanism needs to see whether the transaction is covered under reverse charge or not. Raj is asking, composition supply under RCM, is it taxable under normal rate or composite? What questions are you asking? Composite supply under RCM Is it applicable under normal? What composite supply is under RCM? Now, first of all, clarify what composite supply is under RCM. Reverse charge mechanism, my dear friends, is a separate concept. Composition taxpayer is a separate concept. Please don't mix both of those. The supplies which are covered under under reverse charge mechanism, there is no liability on the supplier to pay tax, and hence, if for any reason a composition taxpayer, any of his supply is getting covered under reverse charge mechanism, it is the recipient who will pay the tax. But let me tell you, composition taxpayer is liable to pay tax on his aggregate turnover. Okay? Mohit is asking, if I purchase a mobile of rupees 40,000 on installment at 11,000 each, what would be treatment of interest 4,000? And this we will cover in detail in the valuation chapter. Please wait till then. Can a registered person opt for composition scheme only for one? No, Sushmita, it cannot happen. No, Raj, casual taxable person cannot opt for composition levy. Okay, so let us move back to our discussion. Let us complete our time of supply discussion. So if you've understood the time of supply with respect to goods, then understanding time of supply for services is no difficult. It's actually on same lines. So here we are referring to section 13, and again the events identified here, there are certain events which have been identified, and the occurrence at the earliest of which you need to pay the applicable tax to the government. First it says date of issue of invoice, where the invoice has been issued within the prescribed time limit, and the prescribed time limit for issuance of invoice is within 14 days. So generally it is within 30 days from the date of supply of service. Either invoice should be issued before supply of service, or the latest that it can be issued is within 30 days of supply of service. This is the normal case scenario. Now, if the invoice has been issued within this time limit, then the date of invoice, subject to date of receipt of payment. So, in case of services, till now, tax is payable on advance, and hence, any advance if received in case of services, till the liability to pay the applicable tax is very much there. So, we have to look at the date of invoice or date of receipt of payment. If the invoice is not issued within the prescribed time limit, then we will need to look at date of provision of service or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. And if for some reason, if neither invoice has been issued nor date of provision of service is available, then date on which recipient shows receipt in his books of accounts, where A and B do not apply. So these are the three categories which we need to look at. First is invoice if issued within the prescribed time limit, that is 30 days, or date of receipt of payment, that is advance. If invoice is not issued within the prescribed time limit, then the date of provision of service or date of receipt of payment, that is advance. Where A and B both are not available, in such case, date on which recipient shows receipt in his books of accounts. Now, what is the last date of issuance of invoice? Generally, it is 30 days. In case of banks, financial institutions, NBFC and insurance, a general aggregate time limit of 45 days from the date of supply has been given. In case of continuous supply of service, where due date for payment is ascertainable from the contract, then on or before the due date for payment. Where due date is not ascertainable from the contract, on or before the time supplier receives payment. Payment linked to completion of an event, on or before the date of completion of event. Supply of service ceases under a contract before completion. In such case, at the time when the supply ceases. So to the extent, so suppose there was a contract for 100 crore rupees, services have been provided only for 50 crore rupees, and the contract ceases, the tax to the extent of such 50 crore needs to be deposited with the government. This is same discussion that we had with respect to goods. Up to 1000 rupees received in excess, no need to worry, pay the tax thereafter when you issue the next invoice. Total contract is for 10 crore rupees. Presently, invoice is being issued for only 1 crore rupees. So the tax only needs to be paid to the extent of that 1 crore. Date of receipt of payment shall be earlier of date of entry in books of accounts or date of credit in the bank account, whichever is earlier. In case of reverse charge, the date shall be date of earlier of the following, that is, date of payment as entered in books of accounts or date of debit in bank account, or 61st day from the date of issue of invoice. What was the scenario in case of goods? It was 31st day from the date of issue of invoice. For some reason, if these details are not available, then in that case, date of entry in books of accounts of the recipient of the supply shall be considered. In case of associated enterprises, where the supplier is outside India, then the date of entry in books of accounts of the recipient or date of payment, whichever is earlier, shall be considered. Voucher, again the same thing. If the supply is identifiable at the point of issuance, then the tax has to be paid at the time of issuance. If it is not identifiable, then the tax has to be paid at the time of redemption. So an example would be an Airtel voucher, which is a specific recharge voucher. Since it is a specific supply, it can only be used for recharging for your voice calls. So the tax has to be paid at the time of issuance. Whereas if it is a Make My Trip voucher, so from Make My Trip voucher, you can book hotels, you can book flights, you can take a package. Ironically, this is something which is not happening right now. But still, in general sense, since Make My Trip voucher can be used against anything, so the tax in that case will only be paid at the time of redemption. The residuary provision here is the same, that if where the point of supply cannot be determined in accordance with either of the above, then in such case, and either of the above meaning it could be for normal case, for reverse charge case, anything. Then in that case, the date on which periodical return is filed or the date on which tax is paid. Here also, if any interest, late fee or penalty, if that is charged, then the tax has to be paid on the receipt of such interest, late fee or penalty. And with this, my dear friends, we've completed our discussion with respect to the time of supply provisions also. And effectively, we have covered chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 1 also, so that's very basic, and chapter 5. Now, chapter 4, I specifically kept it for the last because largely it talks about exemption and there is nothing much to really add to value or to concept. Exemptions are simply something which you need to mug up because there are very fine line of differences. And that is why I will only discuss it at the last, because I believe it's very lengthy, first of all, for discussion. And second of all, there is very limited value which I as a teacher can add to you. Now I will start taking queries. Okay, so Vignesh Ranjan is asking, in case of non-eligible supply, isn't the limit of 10% supposed to be on turnover of state? So Vignesh Ranjan, that is in fact the next step to it, but it has to be seen in totality. Okay, so when we're talking about composition, somewhere we need to look at what is happening at an average, put together the entire turnover for that PAN number. Thank you, Raj. It will help me do even better. Nitya from Chennai is asking, sir, can a composite dealer purchase from unregistered taxable person? So Nitya, ideally he should not, a composite dealer should not purchase from an unregistered taxable person. However, there is no bar. He can purchase from an unregistered taxable person, but then what he will need to do is, he will need to pay the applicable tax at full rate on such purchase from unregistered taxable person. Because see, in case of composition taxpayer, the government wants him to lose his entire ITC benefit. And effectively, how do they do that? They first of all disallow ITC on the purchases. Second of all, they disallow any dealing in any non-taxable goods. Third of all, when making any purchases from unregistered taxable person, they ask the composition taxpayer to pay the full tax and not avail any ITC. Madhav is asking, advance received on supply of services, is it liable to GST? Yes, my dear friend. Advance in case of services is liable to GST. Let me give you a background. Prior to introduction of GST, services were liable to service tax. And in service tax, advance in case of services was always liable to tax. That is why, even under GST, the service sector digested the fact that they are liable to pay tax on advance. But talking about goods, goods were liable to central excise, VAT, CST, and there was never a case of tax being paid in advance in case of supply of goods. That is why, under GST, the people dealing in goods could not digest that they now have to pay tax in advance. That is why, giving into the pressure, government had to take away tax on advance in case of goods, and whereas it is continued in case of services. Shri Vidya is asking, composition payer needs to pay. Are you able to hear me? Okay. So, welcome Madhav. Let me scroll up because I believe there were some queries above which I could not take. Yeah, Malvika was. Why it scrolls down automatically to the bottom. So Bharat had asked, is consulting fee on contract basis liable to GST? Of course it is. Meera was asking, so Sesharai was asking, is CA service liable to GST? Yes, of course. CA service is liable to GST, but not under RCM. We are covered under normal forward charge mechanism. That only legal services are covered under reverse charge. Mrinal is asking, is rural business facilitator? So Mrinal, please wait till the exemption chapter. Okay. So right now, please focus on queries relating to supply, charge of supply, time of supply. I see that none of you has asked many queries relating to time of supply. Is it so easy? Every one of you is already clear on it? हिमांशु इज आस्किंग फ्रॉम उदयपुर, डियर सर हिंदी मीडियम स्टूडेंट्स को एग्जाम में कैसे लिखना चाहिए? देखिए हिमांशु, हिंदी इज अ मदर टंग एंड आई हैव ह्यूज रिस्पेक्ट फॉर इट एज अ लैंग्वेज, बट टुडे इफ यू सी दैट वी हैव वर्ल्ड इज बिकमिंग अ स्मॉल प्लेस, वी आर ग्लोबलाइजिंग लाइक एनीथिंग, दुनिया बहुत छोटी होती जा रही है और अब हम खाली इंडिया के लिए काम नहीं करते. We are in India, we are working for MNCs, we are working for everyone, and now globe is the stage. तो दोस्त आप हिंदी में आंसर दे तो सकते हो, हिंदी में लिख भी सकते हो, इंस्टीट्यूट अलाउ भी करता है, लेकिन मैं आपको एक चीज ये बोल रहा हूं, आप हिंदी में अटेम्प्ट करो, आंसर करो, बट मैं आपको ये बोल रहा हूं जैसे सीए एक चैलेंज है कि आपने सोचा कि मैं सीए बनूंगा, आसान तो नहीं है. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि आप कोई तैयारी नहीं कर रहे हो, मेहनत नहीं कर रहे हो और आप सीए बन जाओगे, ये तो हो नहीं सकता ना बॉस. तो आप इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज को भी एक चैलेंज की तरह लो, आप अपने इमोशंस को, पर्सनल फीलिंग्स को, उसको एक बार अलग रखो, और अगर आप एज अ प्रोफेशनल ग्रो करना चाहते हो कि मुझे एक प्रोफेशनल बनना, एक अच्छा प्रोफेशनल बनना है जिससे कोई भी आके इंटरेक्ट कर सके, मैं किसी को भी एडवाइस कर सकूं और अपनी बाउंड्रीज को तोड़ना चाहते हो, तो आप इंग्लिश को भी एज अ चैलेंज लेके उसमें एक्सेल करो। इंग्लिश न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ो, इंग्लिश न्यूज देखो, इंग्लिश मूवीज जो आप देख सकते हो, इंग्लिश शोज देख सकते हो, इंग्लिश में इंटरेक्शन करो, इंग्लिश लिखना। गलतियां होंगी, लोग हंसेंगे भी, आप टूटी फूटी इंग्लिश बोलोगे, पर डरना नहीं है, घबराना नहीं है। एक बार हंसेंगे आप हमेशा को सीख जाओगे, एक बार गलती करोगे लोग हंसेंगे, आप हमेशा के लिए सीख जाओगे। तो हमें क्या करना है, अब अभी इट इज अ गोल्डन टाइम फॉर यू। आप स्टूडेंट हो, अभी अभी आप प्रोफेशनल नहीं हो, तो अभी साथ ही साथ आप इंग्लिश की भी पढ़ना तैयारी शुरू करो। छोड़ दो हिंदी पेपर, छोड़ दो हिंदी में बात करना, छोड़ दो हिंदी मूवीज देखना, छोड़ दो हिंदी शोज देखना, छोड़ दो हिंदी न्यूज देखना। इंग्लिश ही देखो, इंग्लिश ही सुनो, क्योंकि उससे दोस्त क्या होगा कि आप एक बार वंस यू गेट गुड कमांड ओवर इंग्लिश, आई एम टेलिंग यू दिस इज समथिंग विच हैज बिकम वेरी एसेंशियल। मैं भी बेसिकली यूपी से आता हूं, हिंदी भाषी हूं, हिंदी ही बोलता हूं घर में, नॉर्मली सब जगह मैं भी हिंदी बोलता हूं, लेकिन क्योंकि यहां वी आर ऑन अ प्रोफेशनल फोरम, आई दिस इज समथिंग दैट आई वुड ऑल्सो वांट टू प्रमोट टू माई स्टूडेंट्स, माई किड्स, कि भाई यू हैव टू लर्न इंग्लिश बिकॉज दैट इज द वे फॉरवर्ड। तो दोस्त, आपको अपने आप को फ्यूचर रेडी बनाना है। जैसे आप सीए करके अपने आप को एक पोजीशन पे ला रहे हो ना कि यस आई एम अ सीए, आई एम डिफरेंट फ्रॉम द रेस्ट ऑफ द कैटेगरी, तो आपको इंग्लिश भी वैसे ही लर्न करना है जिससे आप अपने लिए और अच्छा कर लो। Ankush is asking, with transportation service, the advocate service is also under reverse charge. Yes, Ankush, why do you ask repetitively? दोस्त, आप लोग क्यों क्वेश्चन पूछते हो? आप लोग तो सीए बनने जा रहे हो, छोटे छोटे क्वेश्चन बार बार पूछोगे तो मैं कैसे सलाह ले पाऊंगा, आप लोगों को कैसे फी दे पाऊंगा? आप ये छोटे छोटे क्वेश्चन पूछते रहोगे तो बड़े क्वेश्चन पूछो ना यार दोस्त, कुछ ऐसी चीज पूछो ना कॉम्प्लिकेटेड सी। ये छोटी छोटी क्वेरीज क्यों पूछ रहे हो? फॉर आईटीसी, व्हाट फॉर आईटीसी मोहित? जल्दी खत्म हो गया क्लास, अभी और पढ़ाना है, पढ़ाना चाहिए। अभी आप इतना एक बार रिवाइज कर लो, आई एम अश्योरिंग यू विल कवर ऑल द कोर्स विद इन द टाइम। हैड आई नो, so I'm just wanting to focus on some queries, but when I scroll up, it automatically comes down. So in in case of change in GST rates, so Harkrishan is asking a good question. Time of supply in case of change in GST rates. So basically, in case of change in GST rates, you need to look at three things. Basically, payment, invoice, and completion and provision of service. And if any two have occurred prior to change in tax of rate, then the old rate will be applicable. Or if any two have occurred post the change in rate of tax, then the new rate of tax shall be applicable. Okay? Ram is asking, is whole time director liable to GST? Ram, no. This must be coming from the advance ruling in case of MS Claycraft, wherein they have held that एक एडवांस रूलिंग आई है जिसमें कहा है कि डायरेक्टर को मिलने वाली सैलरी भी रिवर्स चार्ज में आएगी। बट दोस्त, ऐसा नहीं है। दैट एडवांस रूलिंग इज नॉट गुड इन लॉ। That advance ruling is not good in law. So don't consider that advance ruling. Only the sitting fee or any other consultancy fee which is paid by the director, only that is covered under reverse charge. Nitya is asking, can that be considered as RCM? What can be considered as RCM, Nitya? Brinda is asking, please share your email ID. Brinda, I believe it is, maybe I need to check if it is allowed. I'll check, and if it is allowed, I will share it in the evening session. But first, let me check. Okay, Ankush is asking a good question. Harmonized system of nomenclature. Now, I am not sure how relevant it is for your course. But for the purposes of your knowledge, let me tell you something. Do you see what is here in my hand? Can someone type what is here in my hand? What do you see in my hand here? This is a glass, right? This is a glass. So in India, if I were to ask for this, I will simply say, can you hand over the glass to me? But you know what? When you go to USA, United States, and there if you say, can you hand over me the glass? This is not what you will get. Because there, they may refer it to as a tumbler. This may have a different meaning in Africa. This may have a different meaning in Europe. So, no, water is in the glass, but this is a glass essentially. Now, some will half filled, half empty, so not that. So, basically, this is a glass, okay, and you refer it, give me a glass of water. But the same thing has different meanings in different geographies. In our India itself, in the North India, we may refer to one thing as something. In the South India, we may refer to something as one thing. Now, suppose I am exporting 1 lakh of these to USA. And on my invoice, I write 1 lakh glass being supplied to that person. And the other person reads and says, 1 lakh glass? What? He has shipped me mirrors, glass to look my face in, or glass to use in my window? What is this glass? So that is why in the World Trade Organization WTO, which covers more than 150 countries, it was agreed that for every particular commodity there will be a 8-digit classification code so that there is a uniformity of understanding that what is the actual product. And basis that the global trade can run, basis that the applicable tax rate can be applied, and that 8-digit classification is known as Harmonized System of Nomenclature, which has been continued under GST. Okay? So this free sample JNE I will cover in the evening session, ITC session. Okay? And similarly, in case of services, service accounting code is applicable. That is again an 8-digit classification. Chapter 1 to chapter 98 is HSN, classification of goods. Chapter 99 is SSE, that is for classification of services. Okay? So with this, my dear friends, I believe we've reached 10:30. Let us please conclude our first session. I believe I've addressed as many queries as I could. For those I could not, please excuse. And let us now meet again in the evening session. So, thank you one and all. And I will take up the answer writing tips and strategies. I'll take that up. Arkishan, please be with me. I'll take that up in the forthcoming sessions. So, thank you. Please go back and revise whatever we have discussed. That's very, very important. Please go back and revise. Okay? And let's meet again in the evening session. Thank you.